I'll meeting to order and call for roll call.
Hey, committee member Lee. I see her, yeah. Committee member Pietzel, here. Committee member, Chair Malone, here. Committee member Becker, here. Committee member Myram,
Here.
committee member Huber,
Here.
Committee member Mason, present. Committee member Smallwood, here. Committee member Sheldon, here. Committee member Walker,
Here.
committee member Exner. There you go.
Sure, I'm here.
And committee member Pulliam.
I'm gonna be the present guy today.
All right.
I'm here too. Oh, yeah, what about hosting?
I apologize. I got thrown on. Everyone is here.
Okay, do I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
I'll make some motion.
It's been moved by Stan and seconded by Carl that we approve the minutes from the last meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Need an amendment? Okay.
Nowhere in
Okay.
here is it mentioned that I was even here
Oh, that's it.
in any of it.
Somebody else. And someone who asked lots of questions, so
Yes.
you were definitely here.
Well, we'll certainly make that.
I'll amend my motion to reflect the presence of, so that, Mr. Greg Becker.
My apologies. Yep.
So I'll ask again, who will approve the minutes as amended to reflect the attendance of everyone present? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. I'd like to clean up. Under public comments, is there someone who wants to speak under public comments? Let's see. So there, the next item on the agenda is public comment.
And we also don't have any raised hands online.
Online, no raised hands, so we will move on the agenda to new business. And I believe that is the police department is next up.
Okay, let's see. I'll let Tyler get this pulled up for me here.
Chair, just to recap where we left off and where we're going tonight.
Okay, that would be good.
For the agenda, it's finishing up the general fund. We have police, parks and recreation, planning and building, I think a few other economic development, and then that will be the general fund, and then we have the utility funds too.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Okay.
Welcome, Chief.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Arnie Roberts. I'm the chief of police here in the city of Sandy. And I know there's going to be, I'm sure there's quite a few questions. We have the largest budget in the city, so it's those numbers are big. So we'll go through these.
Oh, just a second. I wanted to thank everyone who responded to Tyler's email and submitted questions before, and I hope you all got a chance to read the questions that were submitted prior to the meeting. And hopefully you have the answers you needed.
All right, so we'll go through some of this rather quickly, unless you have some questions, and then because I know we're going to want to go through it and spend some time on that. Just move this over just a little bit. I'm having a hard time seeing that. There we go.
Make sure we know we're on the page.
So this is page 37. It's part of it.
Right hand corner? Right in the right hand corner. Okay, must be in the right hand corner.
Okay. All right.
I got that.
On this first page, you can see that the it's really not much that jumps out. The fines, fees, and assessments are up a little bit there, as well as the interest. The intergovernmental outlet, if Tyler wants to expand on that a little bit, he can. But the general revenue is up for our department, and then the overall budget from 7.7, just to use round numbers here, from 21 to 23 up to 8.4, which when you consider that it's going from all the increase in costs that we've had in the last couple of years, and everything that's gone up and our prices have gone up, it's not that big of a difference really. You can see also our personnel services are our largest. We have 20 full-time employees. That's why that's such a big number. Materials and services is also, gone up, not significantly, but it has. But the personnel services are our biggest, as with just about every department we have here. The contingency is a little bit bigger, which I'm happy for. In years past, we haven't had that luxury, so I'm really happy that the budget is looking a little bit better than it has in years past. If you all remember, there was a time not too long ago when we started with quite a bit of a deficit, and there was a lot of reasons for that, of course, but that was made it a lot harder for us to make things work with the people that we had and the things that we needed. So before I move on to the next slide, does anybody have any questions about this? We can start getting into the nitty gritty here. Yeah. Just real quickly, I'm sure you guys will read this. The accomplishments that we've had. We are fully staffed. We're not right now, but those things that we have 2 openings, and we're currently hiring for that. Those were because of resignations that we had. So, but we do have funding to be fully staffed, which will be 20 FTEs. We got the body-worn camera program completed. That's up and running. The SRO contract, the new contract's been completed. That helped us out a little bit too, because we're getting a little bit more for that now. The union contract was settled. That took a while, but we're really happy with what how that worked out, and the guys got a good contract. We're very happy. And we reinstated our halftime evidence technician. One of the reasons we needed to do that was because of that new body-worn camera program. It's so labor intensive getting that data to along with the cases to the DA's offices in timely fashion, because we are under the time restrictions for that. So we just really needed to get that person back up and running. We filled that spot and they're doing fantastic. Then we have a new officer schedule that we implemented, a 12-hour patrol shift that is helping us with our coverage, and our folks have more off time as a result too. So we're happy with that. And that just got permanently implemented not too long ago. We did a 1-year trial, see if our guys were going to like it. We as myself and the rest of the administrative team, of course, there's some advantages for us. And that is staffing and how many people we have on the road at one time. We've been really trying to get 2 people on the road 24 hours a day. And this new schedule helps us with that. So of course there's advantages for us, but our folks they have more downtime, a little bit more time to spend at home. So they get some extra days off and they're really liking it. So we just got that in permanently. So we're happy about that. We have a drone program that we're implementing. It's still in, we're still doing training for that. We've acquired a drone. We got that on there was a grant for that so it didn't cost any money to get the drone, which is nice. So we just have some training, and the actual training is free too. So we've been piggybacking with other agencies for that. So hopefully we'll get that going by the end of the summer. There's quite a bit of training actually with that, with the FAA stuff and all that. Got a new radar trailer that just came in. It's not on the road yet, but it will be in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We're just putting some stripes on it, getting a vehicle ready, and that should be. And we're developing a system with the help of Jeff Pry to get so people can go onto our city website, request it, and then we can almost like we'll fill those orders as they come in. So that'll be nice to get that out there, and that'll be happening very soon. And then that we finally got our patrol vehicles that are now in service. And as you'll see in this, that we needed more, and those are that's in the budget for 4 more. Next slide.
Chief,
Yeah.
if I may. So if you could go back a slide. So, it says fully staffed police department. But what that really is we have filled the positions that you've decided that our department, needs to fill and that we have budgeted for.
Yes.
And so
That's what we consider fully staffed.
Yeah. So, right. So my question though is how do we determine that number? Like, how do we determine what is the right amount of officers that we need in our police department for a community our size, with the different things going on in our community compared to neighboring communities? Like, is that a function of, this is what I think I can get out of our budget committee and our council to fund my budget, so I'm going to pick this many officers? Or is this what you feel is the amount of officers and the functions that they're in that we need for a city to have you know, a fully staffed, fully thriving police department for our community?
Well, there's a lot of different ways that that agencies could come up with that number. You can use the federal the guidelines per 1,000 people you have in your population, which we're below that. Not a great deal, but we're a little bit below that national standards. And then you can use calls for service. How many calls are you going to? Are people overworked? You need 2-man minimum staffing, which we don't have right now. As far as the union goes, we don't have a 2-man minimum staffing, but we are close to that. And that's been something that we've been trying to do. Now, if you ask me just, do we need more people? Of course we do. I mean, we could use another guy. It's not in the budget, but we could use another officer now and another officer in the next biennium. Because of the way that things are in Sandy, all of you know, the population growth, calls for service are going up. So, you know, just like everybody else, all the other departments do, included probably, it's that we're asking a lot more of our folks. And the worry on my end as an administrator is, with this type of work, it's easy to get tired and burned out. And when you got that much workload all the time. We are fully staffed for, like you said, what we have in the budget.
So if we need an extra guy, is that proposed in your 2023 to 25 budget?
It's not. It's not proposed. It's not in my budget. That doesn't mean now I had some slides in here that talked about, possibly looking at increasing the public safety fee that hasn't been increased, which we pay for 2 physicians for that. How many years have we had that now?
Since 2019.
Since 2019. We haven't raised it, but we have had more people coming in to our city. So there's more people paying in, so you get, but it's not enough to cover another officer.
What's the cost for an officer for a biennium?
Average cost somewhere around 260,000, all in benefits and insurance.
When's the last time you had a staff study done?
Oh, we did a study of our own about 3 or 4 months ago.
Independent.
No, we didn't do it independent. It's been a long time and I don't think I've had that.
You know the cost of that?
I don't.
So that's something to Stan's point, I think, is you're right, there's a lot of different standards out there, as we know. But I do think an independent staffing study, we have some money this year. I'd like to see, that would be one of the things I would ask, is that an independent staffing study be conducted. Because there's more, like, we all focus on the shiny cars driving around, but the investigations, I know you guys lean heavily on the major crimes team, and it taps out a lot of different resources there as well. Plus you're an integral part of that system as well, but I know your investigations could be looked at as well too for another FTE. So I think a staffing study would be a step in the right direction for next biennium.
As the council probably recalls, there is a council goal for the sustainable staffing plan. And really that gets to not just the police, but all the departments. We're a fast growing city. What that means is you have to assess where your current level of service is. Can we continue to provide that level of service with the existing staff versus where do we strategically add with the budget dollars that we have? With our budget, the surplus is kind of seen as one-time resources as opposed to ongoing, but those conversations at like council goal setting and stuff, that's where those happen, right? Like if we want to, prioritize where our services are, police versus parks, for example, or police versus planning, things that are generally funded through general fund resources on an ongoing basis. Those conversations happen and then we tailor the budget, right? Like we think we need more public safety. And I think to your point of doing a study, you can then bring in a lot of different inputs into understanding what the community needs for public safety services, right? The perception
The
of
actual
crime, the actual
staffing.
crime.
Shouldn't be done with an over. And with that money that we're talking about.
Right,
But the
right.
study is a one-time expense that could be done with. that.
Exactly. And like I said, there's a lot of inputs that maybe even community input, right? Like, how do you feel about, policing and insanity? What is your perception of crime? Do you feel safe? Do you think you want to see more officers? What kind of policing? So I think it's a valid, request to dive into that.
You were mentioning though, a sustainable staffing study that would kind of brought it to other departments, which I think is important because, we do have a little extra funding this year, but we aren't going to have it in future years. And so in future years, trying to, pay for another cop, it's going to come out, somebody else's ox is gonna get gored or whatever the saying is. And so how do we, you know, when we ask the community, you know, do you feel safe and all that, and we talk about the emphasis, you know, they can help us, give us some feedback. So I like what Rich was saying about doing a study and, you know, but kind of making it a little bit more inclusive, like your sustainable staffing study or something. And I'm sure there's a component part to it with the police aspect of it.
That's something that after the study's done and the results come back, that'll be up to the 7 members of the council to decide
Yeah.
where their priorities are.
Yeah, and we can move along. I just think it's important for our budget committee and our council to have an eye towards, especially from the chief's perspective, you know, what we need, you know, if in a perfect world, you know, what we need from a staffing and resource perspective. Because to me, I mean, and not to put anybody else's budgets down, but I can't think of anything more important that we do here in this body than ensure a safe community for our public. So. Thank you.
If I can just real quick, Chairman, is that okay?
Oh, yeah, I just want to clarify what Tyler said. You said 260 or 280, that's for,
Biennium.
from the biennium. I just want to make sure that
130.
we understood that was the biennium. Cut it down for you.
Yeah, that's a big number. So as to your point, Mayor, that there are the resource portion of that too. When they're looking at this, the numbers, there's only so much, and there's other things that you need to. Not to say not to say that the people that you have are the biggest assets you have. That's the most important. But you know, to run a police department, you've got to have other certain things that we've been lacking too. So there's, you know, like for instance, the vehicles. We have some that are not safe, so those got to be cycled out. And I think it's a really important part of our program this year is when we do this, we'll be able to get the other ones will go away, and we'll be in a position where we're not having to buy 4 at a time. And we can cycle these things out, and it won't be as big of a hit on the budget each time. You know, we just didn't have the money before we got behind on it.
Yeah,
And
the
there's
key is
just-
to
I don't have
carry
any
forward that.
excuses.
I know we have that plan of,
Yeah.
you know, 3 in, 3 out in the past, and it just fell away sometime before COVID. Anyway, Chief, go ahead.
Okay, our goals, we of course have to complete our recruitment process, which we're in the middle of now. That takes some time. Depending on who you get, it takes it can take additional time for training. If somebody is new and they need to go to the academy, if you know that's the case. So we're in the middle of that now, and hopefully that will be completed by the end of the year, I'm hoping. The traffic officer position will be reinstated. That's depending on when we get our people hired too, because we have to fill. The reason that isn't happening right now is because we have to fill patrol slots. That's our first. Patrol has to be filled first, and with the two people that resigned, and we're kind of in flux there. So we need to be back to what I call fully staffed there, and to get this position back in. But that will be reinstated though during this biennium, hopefully sooner than later.
So the traffic officer is the lowest priority to be hired? Is that right?
Well, not to be hired. And maybe I didn't put that right. We have to fill patrol duties first. The traffic position is it's a specialty position. So we have a certain number of openings for patrol, somebody who's taking calls, and they're doing traffic as well. But we have to have those filled first before those have to be filled. That's our. I
So
mean,
we don't
that's-
have an Ed King right now out there passing out tickets.
No.
Right?
No, but we have some younger folks that are pretty eager.
And that dates us.
Yes, it does, but
And then we have some building maintenance, some stuff that we're gonna do this year that's badly needed. We'll get the paint, and I think the roofing will get done, so that the building's what, 11 or 12 years old now. So it's a wonderful building. We just need a few things to be done with that.
Excuse me, is that coming out of that? Because I saw that in the other budget, the facility budget. Is it? I think the roof is in the facility budget.
Yeah, so
maybe
new paint, we consider repairs and maintenance,
Okay,
the general
so
things.
that's
need to
in
be
their
built
budget.
into
Got it.
department-specific budgets.
The
Roof will
roof
be a
is-
capital expenditure paid for out of the other
Okay.
funding source.
Yeah. And I know there's been some, I mean, I think there's been a couple of councilors that have commented on the paint. As soon as it's gonna be done, we have a guy to do it. He's already given us the quote, and he's ready to go soon, so it'll be
New
done.
City Hall lights out.
It'll look nice. It'll look nice.
All right.
It's a little bit.
Do we know why we only got 11 years on the road for 12? Or if we're planning ahead, we'll be closer to that 15. I mean, 15 is kind of like a minimum number on, isn't it?
Well, I know, I'm not a contractor, but the flat roof didn't work out as well as I think we thought, so.
Okay.
So,
Roads are different than.
yeah, and we had somebody come out.
They're not put on like.
Flat roofs are terrible in Oregon.
10 years is all you can get. Is it metal roof though, right?
No, it's not.
It's not?
It's membrane.
Flat.
It's
Okay.
what?
It's
Membrane.
membrane.
No.
The membrane roofs don't last so long, just kind of weather.
I'm not sure. Anyway, that was how they built it. And it's, yes, you know, it's obviously not cheap to get a new roof. It's a pretty big expense. The officer wellness program expansion, I put that in there because that's something that we're continuing on all the time. As an example, we have the 12-hour schedule that we introduced allows for some downtime for them during a shift. Of course, it's call dependent and the folks have to have the radio with them and be ready to respond, but they have times built in each of their shifts to where they can have a little bit of downtime. And if they want, they can work out or do yoga or whatever they want to do. So we turned one of our rooms into an exercise type of room for them, got some equipment, but there's more that we could probably expand on that a little bit. So that's why I put that in there. We're always trying to figure out new ways to do that. Reducing the overtime, our new schedule is starting. We're starting to see that already. So with the new schedule, there's just less overtime. It's not a ton, but every little bit helps. And then completing that fleet replacement project that we talked about, including in those is the new in-car cameras, because not all of our cars had cameras in them before. And when council approved the body worn camera program, we were able to get the rest of the in-car video systems that we needed, and those have been installed. And they will be installed on the new cars that come in, the 4 new ones that come in.
Chief, do you need a traffic officer, or do you feel like you need to fill it because council keeps asking you about a traffic officer?
Oh, I think there's a need, here in our city, yeah. I think there's a need for a traffic officer, yeah.
All right.
I think
Definitely.
if you did a poll of citizens, anybody who drives on the road would tell you, we need a traffic
I
officer.
understand. I'm just holistically, the overall safety. I just want to know, because all of us do say it a lot, but I want to make sure it's not just
Yeah,
responding. to
I
us.
think it's a really good use of resources. Not only are they out there and can cover those areas where we have a lot of complaints. A lot of our complaints are traffic related. So they do that. They also take traffic crashes. So they respond to those when they're on shift, and that frees up my patrol people to do other things. So that it also helps in that regard.
So I'm gonna come back because I would like confirmation on my 10-year roof thing, because I think some of you quoted 10 years as being normal in this environment, and that doesn't appear to be normal at all.
Well, that roof.
Flat membrane.
Between that and your peak.
And a picture.
Minimum years on the TPO roof would be 15 years, and we're in a low radiation area, which means it wasn't installed right, or we didn't maintain it right, which is really what I'm trying to get to. Because if we maintain them properly, they'll last a lot longer.
We'd like to get 15 years out of the new roof.
Well, we should be getting a roof that would do 30 to 45 years on that property.
You never get 30 years.
That might be a good discussion when we get to the facility maintenance budget.
Yeah, I think there's a larger conversation to be had with that, but to your point, I think that there has been several items on the repairs and maintenance schedule that haven't been taken care of in a timely
Delayed.
manner long-term.
That is the budget issue
Yeah.
right there. Okay.
Yeah.
And we pay for it. So we short ourselves in the short term and pay for it big time longer. That's the issue I'm trying to point out. Not whether we should or should not replace the road.
And Chief, one last
Exactly
thing,
right.
when you talk about the traffic trailer that we've got, that we're gonna put out, you're gonna get input from the community. You're already, because we don't have a traffic officer, now, you probably already have hotspots where you know you're gonna put it as soon as it's ready.
Well, I think, well,
Incident
there
related.
are folks that have been calling in already to say, can I get it in my neighborhood? But there are spots, of course, yeah. But there's a lot of that, yeah. We're excited to get it out on the road. There's a lot of demand for it.
And that information will be used how?
Well, actually, the new trailer does keep statistics too, so it's not like our old one. So it has it's chipped where you can, for example, if it's on Bluff Road in a certain spot for say 4 or 5 hours. You can download all that information as far as how many cars went by, what the average speed was, what the top speed was, and then I think it'll be really useful for folks to be able to see that.
Skills on that.
Yeah, things like that.
Great. Okay,
So that's one plus for that. So we did that our old one didn't do, but
perfect.
new technology.
So like sisters where you're headed on. You just put an old police car out there with a mannequin in it.
It works.
Sorry.
Like at the airport too, if you've been there recently, and see police cars all over the place.
It's like a scarecrow.
Yeah.
Then I have a question.
Yes.
So there was just a law passed at the Capitol that would allow for cameras to do speed control. Would that be helpful? Is that something we can do?
That's something that I think the city council may, want to look at for myself. We looked into this before, and I realized that things are a little different now. This was quite some time ago. We ran into some problems with the company that was going to do it for us. They weren't things that I think the council or myself were comfortable with at the time. So that kind of went by the wayside. But you're right, with this new law, it opens up more of that for cities our size. I'm certainly willing to have a conversation with council or whoever wants to. My personal feeling is that I'd rather have a traffic officer than a camera system, but that's my personal feeling. It's not something that's my own.
Chief, to that question, have you guys explored the traffic safety grants that are available? I realize there's a match, but has that been explored?
Yeah, we've looked into that some. Yeah, we haven't been successful yet with any of that. But that doesn't mean that we don't still are looking into it and trying. And we do have also there's a lot of mini grants too for overtime and truck inspections and things like that we have done. And we do have a current agreement with ODOT for. But that isn't like what I think you're talking about, something a little different.
Seatbelt, speed,
Yeah.
pedestrian safety.
Yeah, seatbelt, speed, pedestrian safety, and also the truck inspections, which we have our guys, a lot of our guys are certified to do that, but we lost the position, so. But we do still have a contract with ODOT too. Well, they'll pay that overtime when the guys out there just focusing on trucks or seatbelts and things like that.
Any other questions of Chief? Moving on.
Going to the highlights, we've talked about some of this. I figured that everybody knows the patrol vehicles. We're going to replace the laptop computers. They're coming at their end of life, and I've worked with IT, on that, since they're the experts on that. What we should be getting, what kind of product we need to that'll adapt to the stuff that we already have in our cars too, so the cost is lower. So we'll be able to do that and not have to change this, our stands in the cars, which is very expensive. So we'll be looking to get new computers that are adaptable to what we have in our vehicles, which will keep the cost down. I think the last time we did it, it was over $100,000. That's because we had to buy the new docking stations and things of that nature. But this one, so we won't have to buy that portion, so that's nice. Includes the one-time payment to C800 radio project. I figured there might be questions on that, so.
So that's what it was, the one-time payment.
This is there's a one-time payment that's due. Yeah, and that was from a cost overrun of the project. If you folks remember the bond that they have, and there was a lot involved with that, right? And that number started out a lot higher, of course, but the committee is, we found ways, had some ARPA money from the county. They're selling some equipment to get those numbers for each agency down. And it was well above that number that we have now to start out with. This is where we're at now. So at least it's better than it was. I don't have the number it was to start out with, but it was well over 70,000 or something to begin with, or more. And we talked about the public safety fee. So I just wanted to, we already mentioned that, so I can move on to the next slide unless people have questions about that.
Seeing that, move on.
That's my last slide. So we'll go into the meat and potatoes. Folks who have questions about things, and I've got my sheet here and I'm ready to go when you guys are.
I'm ready. I'll bring it up here because I know it's going to be one of the things in my head. In your PERS, it's one of the biggest numbers, $1 million to us.
Yeah.
Are we keeping up with our PERS? Are we able to we into any difficulty in paying those officers and others. I remember that, I guess I'm looking at.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking specifically about the unfunded liability, that is, just an expenditure that's never gonna go away unless we win several millions of dollars to make a lump sum payment to PERS to pay off the unfunded liability, but that's every agency in the state that has that problem.
It probably won't happen to us in all one big lump, so.
No, so they,
Thinking about, as we get closer to some of our officers and our employees get close to retirement, are we gonna get any kind of trouble with any matter?
no, there wouldn't be any large lump sum payment due. The rates are adjusted every 2 years, so our rate increases might, go up again in the future. A lot of that, though, is dependent upon how the market performs and the investment earnings on the first fund. So, it's kind of I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't give you a 100% answer, but the overall rate increase for this upcoming budget period was only a 6% increase in the first cost. So, for the first rate rather, which is substantially less than 2 years ago. I think that was a 22% rate increase that we had 2 years ago. So maybe we are seeing a stabilization or leveling out of the rate increases compared to prior biennia. But you're right, Counselor or committee member. Next to salaries, it's the second largest cost in personnel.
An online member with a question,
I was just gonna
can
add.
you call it? Yeah.
That's Noah Myron.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Hello, Chief. Nice to see you. I know last budget cycle, there was $88,000 given for training. And I just kind of wanted to get an update on what training was completed with those dollars, how many officers received additional training above whatever was already allocated again, and just kind of get an update on that.
Of course, I'm not sure what the figure, did you say 80? Because it wasn't 80,000.
It was the ARPA dollars. I know I'll have to go back. I thought it was 88,000.
No, I think for training, we had right around 30.
Well, you may be, that's the entire number we allocated.
Right, the entire number was 88.
Okay, yeah, so anyway, so to answer the question, the training portion of that was right around 30. And that was the council or the budget committee had given us extra money for that. And what we used that for is when we had some folks that retired and resigned, we lost. The folks that we lost were our in-house instructors, which when I say that, I mean in-house instructors for, say, firearms, defensive tactics, driving, and things like that, that we needed to send those folks. We needed to get new folks that were interested in that and get them through the instructor development courses, which are they're longer and they're more costly. That's what we use those for. That's what we use the extra training dollars for. And we did refill those training instructor positions with current folks, and they're done with all that training.
Was the other for body cam?
Yeah, so to clarify, there's 152,000 last biennium that was allocated in addition to what was already allocated to the police department. 14,000 of that went to training, 67,000 went to lease payments for 3 new leased vehicles, and then 71,000 for the purchase of the dash and body cameras. So
Yeah.
a small allocation went to the actual training, which she has responded to that.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, Chief, thank you.
You're very welcome.
I have a question. Chief, with the 4 new cars that you're gonna have this year, was the vehicle fuel just looked a little light? Like, I don't know how many vehicles you have now, but you used 60,000 for this budget, and then it only jumped to 75 with 4 more cars. Is that adequate?
I believe it is, yeah. I think it is.
You're retiring cars, you're not just bringing on 4 additional, right?
Oh, some will be recycled out.
Recycled out.
Some will be cycled out, yeah. It's not like we're gonna have more people on the road.
I thought you were gonna have more cars, so I'm sorry.
Oh, we are in the cars, but we're getting rid of some of those ones that I was talking about that are, I think they're 2014 models.
Okay.
So that, and they're high mileage.
I see on the performance measures that calls, physical arrests, citations have all gone up, but the officers per thousand keeps going down. So it really shows that there's probably a need for more policing.
Yeah, that's kind of what we talked about before too. Those, there's a lot of different ways to determine that.
We're at
Cost for service.
1.24, the highest we've ever been is 1.5.
Yeah.
So that's not that.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
So in our council retreat, one of the big goals coming out of that was compliance and having a homeless liaison and dealing with code enforcement and those kinds of things. I know when we were looking at our planning budget, we're talking about, and part of that conversation was the planning function of that, and some of the conversation was law enforcement. Planning looks like that they're going to try to beef up their budget for code enforcement. What I see in the budget highlights, I don't see anything that really addresses that conversation. How are you planning on kind of addressing that goal?
Well, that's not going to be in my budget, right? That's not what you're saying? The new code enforcement officer, right?
Right, but we talked about, there was kind of this holistic conversation of someone who was dealing with mental health services, kind of homeless liaison. There's kind of this code enforcement, camping ordinance kind of function of that. We talked about how we may need to reach out to the county to see kind of what collaboration resources they may have for us. I'm assuming that.
That's not the code enforcement position that's in the budget. The one in the budget is working with the building department.
I understand.
That's
but
what
my-
he's getting at. I
what-
want to know where the other.
But what I'm looking for is where's the other half of that? Because at our council retreat, we talked, there's a law enforcement function of that and there's a planning function of that. And so we have Mooney. So are you just believing that we're going to be able to, he's gonna have more time now because planning's gonna take that off of his plate, or how are you addressing that?
Yeah, that is part of it. And I think that's the part right now is it's going to be extremely helpful for us. The new code enforcement position is going to be really helpful for us. It's going to allow much more time to deal with some of those other things on the enforcement side for him to do. That's the big help for us in that. And that's going to make a big difference. And by the way, he's excited about it, but because it has a significant amount of work to do that doesn't relate to that. And we really need him to be more focused on that. And that's what this will allow. So it's going to be a big help for us.
Yeah, I think that was the intent, is to free up time for the community service officer to do more of that type of work. There's also things that we don't have answers to, and on what the budget might be for behavioral health and partnerships and things like that. So anything that was in the budget would just be a placeholder, kind of a pick it out of the sky. Are we going to have a contract of $50,000? Who knows at this point, but that might evolve over the next couple of years. But I think with the homeless liaison, the RV permit and all parking permit program would be done by the community service officer in the police department, and then planning and building stuff as a code enforcement position.
But we're not really taking on kind of the mental health and, stuff and all that we had a conversation with quite yet. And I know we
Not
left that
yet.
kind of ambiguous, but
Yeah.
I'm just, I
Not
guess, because this is a 2-year budget.
Well, that sounds
So-
like a
so-
county function. Mental health,
No,
sounds-
We've had a whole
We've
conversation.
had a whole
about this, yeah.
conversation about this though. And so, but I don't see, this is a 2-year budget. So when I see that it's not reflected in budget highlights for a 2-year budget, to me, that says that conversation is going nowhere for 2 years.
Kathleen?
Well, we can put it in highlights. Conversation.
All right, it took up 3 hours that retreat, not 3 hours, that's exaggeration, but it was a considerable amount of conversation.
Yeah,
You have your hand up?
I just real quick, I had raised a concern about the fact that, when parks used to be in 4 different departments, somebody was doing the, planning, other department was doing the operations, and somebody else was doing the maintenance and all that. It was really difficult trying to work with parks because it was kind of this stuff, all the authority and none of the responsibility. It was very challenging. And so now I'm thrilled, it's kind of all that's gotten fixed. But what I am worried about with the code enforcement stuff is, again, when we have code enforcement officers in 2 different departments, I'm concerned there's a potential for, they both need to be working together, obviously, because there's some overlap and, probably they're all coming out of the general fund anyways. And so there's some opportunities to, work together in a way to be efficient and effective and all that. And I don't know what that is. I am going to bring it up because I just think it is
Yeah.
important to coordinate that, kind of define roles and responsibilities. And that gets to your issue too. And to build on that, I would, the other thing I mentioned was, and it's something I want to work with the council more, and the homeless task force is just coming up with an action plan for how we're kind of dealing with the homeless. Who makes contact? Who goes searches these homeless camps out in the forest, in the parks? Who, just so that we're all really clear as to who's doing what and what the process is. That's what I'd like to see us. And it's not a budget thing, but I want to see us kind of work on that.
But here's where it does become a budget thing, is if we don't have the resources to do what you're talking about, we need to know what financially we need to do to make what you're talking about happen.
Well, I think we
And
do
that's
have I think we do have the budget. I think roles and responsibilities haven't been clarified for that. Because, when I'm out there picking up the same crap that you and I picked up
Yep.
2 years ago,
Yep.
filling my pickup with it, then that's, is that something that we should be doing? That's kind of what I'm talking.
Right.
It's a different discussion.
That's
Right.
real, that's a good discussion to have. And I actually, now that you bring that up, that there's gonna be a point in time when we don't know what some of these are gonna be either yet. But we do know that it'll make a big difference, like I told the mayor, that it'll really make a difference on the workload, and that it'll free up other things, but those details really haven't been worked out for us yet. And also, and I know that Kelly and I haven't had a chance, he's contacted me, but we haven't had a chance to get down to talk about those, exactly what you're talking about. So those things, I think they're gonna be worked out, and maybe the council wants to be part of it. I'm not sure, but so some of that stuff you're talking about really hasn't been worked out yet, but we do expect
But we
it.
got it funded, and that's
Well,
great.
it'd be nice
So
to
that's
get it
what we're
worked
here
out prior to the person actually being hired, so that when they're hired, they know what their responsibilities are gonna be.
Well, that's the goal, of
And
course. Yeah.
Jeremy, you had one thing for.
Oh, yeah, I just, not to get too far in the weeds of this, just that, this is about the budget, making sure we have money funded for it. But that's what we have staff to be able to work that out. So just like we may have some FTE coming out of one, half of an FTE or something coming out of multiple different budgets. That's not really for the budget committee to hash out all those, but to make sure we do have money available and put in those places for that, and let the professional staff work that out.
And council
And then the council.
with
obviously
council's
gets to have
instruction
the instruction
and input.
for that.
It's not even mentioned in the budget highlight.
But
Did you have something?
I was gonna do a point of clarification that the behavioral health component in the council goals was stated to explore partnerships and share costs. So we'll continue to work on, researching what that looks like, who we can partner with. But to committee member Peitzel's point, we don't know necessarily where that's gonna live either. So it is referenced in the budget under goals, but not under a specific department at this point in time, because we don't really know what that looks like yet.
Yeah, I have a couple questions, but to that point, I just want to add that I feel like your priorities usually follow the money. So usually where you put the money, that's gonna be your priority. So I don't know what that says to not have money allocated at least for something. But different point. So I do have a couple questions about your budget, and I apologize, I didn't send this in the email because I just noticed it, but with 2 employees down, and I hope that's that lot that you stay fully staffed for the next couple of years, but it's a ever-changing work environment right now. Is $1,500 enough for recruiting?
We've typically spent less than that on
Okay.
recruiting. Yeah.
And you're getting qualified applicants and that you're satisfied with, and
We've had really good luck with that.
professional services, what exactly are professional services?
Okay, so we had a question about that earlier too, so thank you whoever sent that. That was also brought up with another department, I think, too. Professional services is, for example, all of our software costs, such as our records management system, our Lexipol system that is a program for our policies. All those programs that we use, from scheduling software, they all have annual or biannual costs, and they're very expensive. Also in there, it's not just that, there's things like if we have a new recruit that has to take a medical exam, or have a psychological fitness for duty done, or whatever that may be, that would be paid under professional services as well. Additionally, there's something that you're very familiar with, I'm sure, that's really costing a lot of money, that mostly because of the change of the laws in the DUI laws, is we're paying for blood draws out of that too, which is a medical thing, and you can, that costs, I mean, just to give you an example, my 2 months ago, it was, my monthly cost for that was $1,000 just to have blood drawn, because they charge $200 every time they come in. And you know that this is something that we've been trying to explore to try to, you know, how are we gonna, is there something else we can do to, whether that even out of the box thinking, can we have a phlebotomist? Or can we have somebody do, you know, something? And we've looked at the local fire department too, and there's some, you know, hangups with that. So yeah, there's all those come out of professional services. The RV, yeah, the cost of getting the RVs when we get them off the road to have them broke down, environmentally safe, that comes out of there, and you know that could be up to $3,000 per or so. And all these things that, you know, I've discussed with Tyler too, is, hey, if we had a separate line item for all these, this thing would be just, it would just be crazy, because it's just easier to put them all in, because we've had that discussion about putting them all in separate line items. So we would literally have probably 15 or 20 different line items that we're taking the services that we're getting from these other professionals to do this work.
My question was directed to, like, I know you've implemented body worn cameras and some changes. And I guess I'm just wondering, and I'm aware of the RV and all of that, $75,000 really enough? Like, is that really meeting the needs, or, because I just like it clear and transparent.
Yeah, and
That's why
I'm basing that, you know, on what we spent last time, and then how much more I think it's gonna be if these prices go up. So it's gone up and not a lot. And a lot of these things, folks, are, I mean, you know how some of these things are bare bones. I mean, there's only so much money, and you when you estimate that and you start looking at all these costs, right? I think it's gonna cost this much, I'll add a little bit, but I gotta move on to the next line item and make sure. I mean, so there's a gamble in some of this, of course, I totally get that. But it's that much because I figured that's how much it would be in the next 2 years, and that's just what it came out to be. You know, you're right, that it could be a little more than that.
how much do you pay? I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but how much do you pay for body worn cameras per year?
We spent that money that we spent is a 5-year contract.
You don't have a, okay, so we're already paid for.
It's paid for.
Oh, well, awesome. Okay, great. Thank you.
And that's paid for, so we're good. Now that there will be some, you know, something to look into in I think 4 more years. When that contract is up, we could renew, and it would involve a monthly fee or something like that, or however, we could do it in different ways. But for now, that's taken care of.
Oh, right, that's cool. Thank you.
When is the loan up? When are you gonna be done paying off the loan? I see loan interests and stuff like that.
I'll let you answer.
Yeah, so that's the interfund loan to the transit fund. At the end of the upcoming biennium, there's 151,000 remaining. So I think another 3 years after that.
Okay, thank you.
Don,
I just want to go back to make sure I understand the draft. So in this current biennium, we have a certain number of officers, one of whom is code enforcement, all coming from the police department budget, correct?
Mhm.
And then this next biennium, we're switching that one officer to,
no,
No,
we're adding
We're-
another code.
we're adding a position to take on that function under a different department. So effectively, we have one additional FTE in police, not a new person, but a new,
No, it's
I'm sorry, what am I missing here? Because if we have this big a pie and we're carving out this piece of the pie and moving it to.
So the way I
different
understand it, we have a code
Can I answer that?
enforcement in police,
His time
who's
was.
spending his time both in building code violations and other code enforcement type things. Now we're having one that's gonna take that code enforcement building
Yes,
stuff
there it
off
is.
of them.
So there's a percentage of that one FTE that you gain in this coming biennium because of that function shifting, I'm assuming. Whether it's 10% of that FTE or.
It's 0.12 FTE. So police in the current biennium is 19.88. It's going up to 20 FTE. It's a very small fraction of time that was allocated previously to building plan, and now belongs to be 100% housed within the police department.
Okay.
Our position, not correct.
Right. And then just related to that, this new position, is that a sworn officer?
No,
That's just.
Yeah, they're non-sworn person.
But when the person's actually hired, I would imagine the council will have input into how that's set up. It's
Of
not a
course.
budgetary thing, it's a
Yeah,
time
no, okay.
allocation thing.
That helped me. Thank you very much.
Council's purview.
I'm slow.
You're not.
No, yeah. This is a lot of stuff here.
Yeah. Thank you, Chief.
Of course. Thank you very much, everyone. Only 50 minutes for the sun still shining. Okay.
We have a bunch of work to do. Push along.
All right, next up on the agenda is Parks and Recreation. Rochelle is on Zoom to help answer any questions that come up, but I'm going to provide the presentation on this department for these departments. And I first want to give just a brief background on where we used to be and where we are today. So for decades and decades and decades. 42. Page 42. Thank you. For decades and decades and decades, the what used to be referred to as community services included recreation and senior services. When our previous public works director retired, Parks was housed under Public Works, and that was moved over into this Parks, or moved under this community services umbrella and retitled Parks and Recreation now. So Parks and Recreation includes recreation, senior services, parks, buildings, and ground maintenance. Essentially facilities. So that's just kind of a little bit of a shift, mostly on the administrative side of things, but just to help paint the picture, there are now 3 departments under this larger Parks and Rec umbrella. And so the first department that we'll talk about is recreation. You can see that we're budgeting an increase in fines, fees, and assessments. That's largely due to increased participation in programming and events and community sponsorships, a slight increase in general revenue. Personnel services is actually down this upcoming biennium because of a reallocation of staff among those 3 departments now. There's not really any new FTE. It's really just reallocating how the bodies are being split up with the work they're doing. Materials and services, there is an increase there. Part of that is related to added costs with contracted recreation programming, referees, things like that. And think of youth basketball, for example. We have additional costs associated with building monitors and some custodial work to help clean up those spaces that we rent for those programs. And so really it accounts for an increase in the programs being offered as well as just increased costs for those existing programs we've always had. There's just more to it now.
That was one of the questions that was submitted.
Yes, exactly. And then, not a lot to talk about with transfers and contingency there. Transfers, as you know, go to the indirect service costs to help support those finance, HR, administrative functions. And then a little bit of contingency plugged in there in the event of unexpected issues or items that arise. And over the last several months, the existing biennium, we reestablished programs and events. The senior center / community center reopened in May of 2022, and an estimated 4,000 community members have participated in programming and events. A real highlight and accomplishment is the community fundraising and sponsorships that have been received since reopening to the public, $38,000 from a variety of different community members and community organizations, but that's really a testament to Rochelle and her team and hitting the ground running with new programs and putting money in to help sponsor these events that we do. They've diversified revenue sources, analyzed new revenue streams. I know the council is aware, budget committee probably not, but they hired a consultant to help do some cost recovery work and facilitate discussion among the council and the parks board and really the city as a whole in some cases on developing a better way to prioritize what programs should be subsidized, what programs should be charged accordingly, and how to really bridge that gap between community members that need services that maybe can't afford it, or community members that have excess funds and can do more of those. What's the word for it? Yeah, I mean, they can afford, a different type of program. We want to prioritize like community safety events over, I'm making up something, right? Karate in the park, that's not a real program, but you get the idea. We want to prioritize safety programs and things that impact youth over other programs that are maybe more of a recreational, purely, enjoyment aspect. And then explore council and community recreation services, determine how the department can support by adding new events, programs, classes, and social services. We talked a little bit about in the non-departmental budget last week, some things that were moved from non-departmental into recreation. I think committee member Exner had asked that question about fireworks and some other community events. That's now housed under the recreation department. And that department continues to explore ways to get additional interest and activity in those community events, as well as having to support other departments in their endeavors to increase community engagement. So
Hold on real quick. So that's a little new to me. So from our conversation, our Arbor Day festivity, I picked up on, so they're taking over the holiday tree lighting, for example, which was traditionally housed in the library department. And then they're also doing the fireworks as well, because that was usually your baby.
That was my,
correct?
somehow that ended up being my baby, yeah. And logical location for fireworks display.
So,
Right?
I'm just curious, is that really kind of the only two that's been transferred over? Or has there been more that's gone over there? Oh, thank you. I didn't see that.
Largely those two events, as well as, which it's lived there before along the State Parkway. But I think to sort of increase like the level of that event operates at, just with the departments that are participating, the events that are there at that event.
It's a lot easier to see the difference putting it into Rex compared to the library before. That was very confusing when we looked at it 2 years ago.
Yeah. And someone mentioned fireworks sponsorships. That's 100% sponsored by Clackamas County Bank. They've been an amazing partner for at least a decade, I'm sure much longer than that. Fully intend that sponsorship and partnership to continue. But it's really a recreational program, not a finance function. So that's been removed from my umbrella and placed under there.
Tyler, you've done a phenomenal.
Oh, thank you. I signed a contract, had a check. That's really been my participation in that program.
You didn't pick out the fireworks?
I didn't pick out the fireworks. Make sure that we have insurance, coverage for the event, but otherwise
I'm seeing from my house.
yeah. We'll go to your place next time, so I don't have to parking. Goals for the upcoming biennium. They want to really work on creating a recruitment and onboarding process for volunteers. That's been pretty loosey-goosey sort of volunteer experience in the past. And so tightening that up and having a really good volunteer program is a priority for the department. Working with Oregon Trail School District to develop a new facility use agreement. It's been a struggle, especially post-COVID, and getting access to the gyms, especially with the volume of participants that we've had with youth basketball specifically. And so really just trying to renegotiate that and make sure that we're truly benefiting from that partnership that we have with the school district.
In the past, we've done a lot of things like the volunteer picnic and a few others. I guess I would put that in. That's something that we're thinking about enhancing now, and we're trying to do besides training, drawing people in. That's volunteers is a great way and a very efficient way to get some of these things done.
I think part of creating a new onboarding and training process will just by default sort of make us re-examine the entire volunteer process and package that we have here, and how can we increase the appeal, how can we increase the interest, how can we get more people in the door. The volunteer picnic specifically, I believe we also moved under recreation. And so, that will, the team down there will hopefully be able to spearhead some creative ideas on how to increase volunteers, throughout the organization. I think from a realistic standpoint, though, many of the volunteers we have volunteer because they're specifically engaged in that, event. But the volunteers at the library, for example, there's numerous of them, and they just love library services, and that's where their interest is. So that's how they've, as patrons of the library, have found those volunteer opportunities. And we've, seen that in all of our departments that have a large roster of volunteers because they have a real interest in that specific service that's being provided there. One of the council goals, and it's a goal now of the department as well, is to find ways to connect Sandy residents with aquatic opportunities, recognizing that water and life safety that we aren't able to offer currently with the pool being closed. They're gonna explore opportunities with local pool facilities and potentially other options as well, depending on how that goes, to really get some sort of option available for youth and swim lessons. And then, obviously continuing to grow special events, programs, community services, and continue to work on getting to that cost recovery goal. And actually get the policy over the finish line, hopefully here in the next few months, to have a solid policy to reference when we're working on that. And then lastly, continue to build upon the Winter Fest that we created, or that the team had created in Atlantic Park. I think we have about $30,000 more than last year allocated to, sort of invest in that program. Lights, sponsorships, obviously a huge part of that as well, but really prioritizing that sort of winter wonderland, winter fest, to balance out the summer mountain festival that we have, having that event in the winter.
Me and then Don.
Yeah.
All right, we both love this Winter Fest. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, we need to call it the same thing every time. So one of us, we all got to
Yeah.
figure out what it is.
It's Winter Fest on this slide. I think I said Winter Wonderland. My apologies.
This Arbor Day thing, I just learned all kinds of stuff. So one of the things I also learned is that there was someone who they were looking at new electricity options in the park. And so I just want to make sure that has that kind of been done, looking at what we're able to do and what our limitations are. And then after discovering our limitations, have we allocated budget or thought towards how to address those limitations?
So I'm going to answer part of that, and then I'll kick it over to either Rochelle or John to answer the other half of that. We did do some electrical work before this last Winter Fest, and increased capacity there. I don't know what the status beyond that is, though, and I see Rochelle's camera is on, so I'll kick it over to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Yeah, I can answer that really quick. So yeah, we had a contractor down there to take a look at it. And so we're currently getting estimates, and there's an opportunity for some additional expansion with electricity. We've got some repairs that we can continue to do. And so we're working on that estimate, and that's something that we plan for. We have a repairs and maintenance portion under parks that we can add that into, and then put some of that under the special events or the community events line item. So we've planned for that, because as we continue to grow this, we're going to need to expand our electricity and our options to do that. So
just to be clear, because we have this, this fun $1 million of money to allocate. You guys feel comfortable with your budget allocation on the electrification, like kind of bad words, of the park. You feel comfortable with where you're at?
yeah, I mean, ideally, if we want to continue to grow this program, that would be a definite consideration. If we want to turn this into, like a very, very large production over the next couple of years. Last year we invested, I think it was probably close to about $3,500 in our electricity at Meinig. If we wanted to continue to grow this, then that would be probably a substantial ask. And we're incrementally planning on improving this program. And so this year we were going to fix what we didn't last year, add a few more outlets. Last year we added a 220 so we could use that as like a spider and, have that extend out into the rest of Meinig. And so, yeah, there might be a bigger ask after this biennium if we want to have a really incredible large experience, but incrementally we're going to get there. Mm-hmm. So we're comfortable with it, but if there's a will to provide more for electricity, we would use it. So. Mm-hmm.
So
Don's next then.
So two things. First of all, as far as the Wonderland Christmas Festival thingy, more. We cannot go fast enough. There's not a lot of really cool things we get to do in the next 2 or 3 years. This is one that doesn't cost a lot of money, has a fantastic return on investment in terms of bringing people into the community. There's nothing like it outside of Portland. So for anybody who's on the east side, let's make this the place to come. And if that means 30,000 needs to go to 130, I think that's a good investment, and we need to think big. So not just nickel and dime it, but let's be strategic in getting those infrastructure upgrades. So that's part one.
if I can jump in for a second to answer that question, Committee Member Hokinson. So I know John Wallace, who's in the crowd, he actually did receive some quotes for some animated and some custom lights. And this year we did decide to go with a custom Sandy logo. And so if and it wasn't inexpensive. And so if again, to your point, if there's a lot of opportunity, there were some bridge structures that we're actually looking at making and creating in-house to save us some money. But there's we would quickly and absolutely grow this program with additional funding for the Winterfest. So
I think exactly, the lights east, exactly. Second point, if we can go back to the slide, we talked about the water safety. And I appreciate you, Tyler, for mentioning the money that had been earmarked towards the Winterfest. There wasn't a money earmarked towards that. So to Rich's point earlier, we follow the money. So that's near and dear to me, to make sure that we provide training and opportunities for kids and adults to get their proper water safety and training. Is there a dollar amount that you guys have been thinking about, Rochelle or Tyler?
So this patient programs?
Well, she meant it was on the bullet.
Yeah.
So I just wondered, is there a money associated with it?
yeah, so at this point, we did not earmark anything in the budget for it, other than we are in the exploratory phase where I know John's been doing some research. He came back with some options that we're evaluating, anywhere from renting a pool facility for a couple hours and transporting kids to have some experience with water. And I think the pool was Arrow Pool, I believe is, and John, I can't see you, but if I got that wrong, please correct me. But so at this point, we don't have any of that money allocated towards those programs, but there would be a revenue side that would come in if we were to offer that would offset any of those expenses and again meet our cost recovery metrics.
I just want to make sure if you need seed money to make that reality, that we properly fund you. Thank you.
My next for Carl. Carl.
Carl first, then Kathleen.
So in this particular area, I have a question too, but in this particular area, we talked about having some of the volunteers become more involved, recruit more of them. And we're talking electrification. Certainly this seems like it fits PGE pretty well. Certainly we should be able to find some way to encourage them to participate. I don't hear very much of their name around here. They produce a lot of electricity within the entire city, franchises, all the rest. So maybe a good thing to take a crack at is see if PGE could help us out with some of the electrification things. A totally different piece of work. I notice is in our council goals under Parks and Recreation is one of the things that we said we would do would be to deal with future facilities and natural areas and open space preservations and things. I'm not seeing any of that in your goals or any of the identified things that we would like to see financed. How does that get displayed in what we have here under Parks and Recreation?
We're not there yet.
Or
we're not there. We're just doing recreation, and then we have to do seniors, and then we do parks.
get it, right?
Yeah.
It's in a different spot.
Yeah. So
Recreation.
we'll get into it.
Okay.
My question though, coming back to the Christmas lights and all, and the electrical upgrades, and I like your idea about the PGE. They have community grants available, PGE does, where they work with communities on these kind of things. What I really want to make sure is that, you know, put whatever electrical you need to out there. It'd be good to be able to get the camera system in there. I'm thrilled about that, but the concern I have is that, you know, when we have Wi-Fi out of this building and we have unlimited plug, outlets out in the park, and then we're surprised when there's a bunch of homeless camping in Mining Park and all the neighbors around here, going nuts. We just need to make sure that when we're doing all these outlets, that they can be shut down with some sort of a automatic shut off, not, really inside here, not because otherwise they'll just, break open the boxes and stuff. That's really going to cause us a lot of problems. So we have to have it done right and not increase our headaches.
Liability.
Michelle or John, from a budget standpoint, on your second bullet, working with OTSD to develop a new facility use, is there any budget asks or any financial things that we can do there besides just build the partnership from a budgetary standpoint?
Well, one of the things and the reasons that we've seen an increase in example for like Mountain Storm is because there has been an increase to the use of the space with the Oregon Trails School District. We have been in communication with them about options for an IGA and what that might look like. And we'll continue to make those efforts regarding supporting us monetarily. The support actually comes from the increase to that budget line item because we're adding students and visitors to that program, but we're also paying some additional more for the refs, the coaches, the use of the space. And so that's where the support comes in. And we did account for that increase, but we'll continue to work towards that goal because that's a goal of ours too. So.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we're, at least in here, budgetarily supporting that. Thank you.
And I know we need to move on.
Yeah, just a real quick question, and it's under transfers. You have 89,124. It then shows up in the next page, indirect support cost, 89,124. What are we transferring from?
It's the overhead. That they, yeah.
So that's the recreation is considered a direct service, and so that.
Right, so it's coming from the general fund?
Yeah, or user fees. I mean, it's coming from the larger pot of revenue, and then being transferred to those indirect support costs, admin, finance, PR, IT.
Yeah, my only thing kind of coming off of what Don was talking about with the aquatics is, you know, I feel like we're maybe a little late now because we're in the budget and we're talking about it, but the hope coming out of our goal settings is when we say that we want to increase access to aquatics to our recreation, that perhaps that leads into the budget cycle. But then when we sit and look at the budget, we have budget allocation going towards our transit department or towards the recreational vehicles that are kind of going to be able to drive students back and forth between Mount Hood Community College and our city. I mean, the way this sets up from goal setting and then several months in between in budget is to hope that our goals lead into our budget initiatives. And so, you know me, I'm always the blunt one. It ruffles feathers, but you know, I would be one that would hope that this budget would reflect our goal of increasing access to aquatics and providing some sort of funding ask or budget to be able to get kids on buses into aquatics. And I feel like that's what the council kind of asked for.
Yeah.
Not really a question.
Sounds like a statement.
Any additional questions regarding recreation?
I just want to clarify, and I support it, but the whole volunteer thing is for all parts of that. It's for parks and trails, it's for seniors, you know, Meals on Wheel drivers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it belongs in, you can put it in recreation, but it's the, you know.
Yeah, it's specifically listed under that,
Yeah,
you know,
that's fine.
branch of the tree, so to speak, but it really is an organizational goal overall. It's not necessarily highlighted in other places, but it's something Angie has talked about since she was hired. We just haven't been able to really prioritize it, but with other departments also wanting to prioritize that, it makes it easier for it to become a whole city initiative versus the onesie-twosie approach, so.
It also seems maybe between now and the next meeting, that you might look at a way to maybe augment the recreation budget to include the things that the mayor talked about that came up in the goal setting session.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
some
one of the
kind of
challenges with
placeholder in
program,
there.
I mean, is, you know, as you know, John's and Rochelle stated, they're doing the research now. On
Right.
what pools are out there, what's gonna cost, how do we provide the transportation, what are the fees gonna be?
Well, there should be at
Charge
least a
that.
placeholder there for that, not just the research, but something that says, if we do all this research, we find a way to do it, we have a pot to pull from. There is some, as opposed to just pull it from somebody's contingency budget or from the general fund budget or whatever, have a placeholder there for the council goal.
I totally agree with that. I mean, again, this is a 2-year budget. So I just want to get 2 years down the road and have it budgeted for it.
Senior services, so senior services is a department that, as the title suggests, provides services to seniors both in city limits and in the broader Sandy area. The senior center service area runs roughly from Boring up to Alder Creek, and then along 26 slightly, a little bit further than that, but it's a pretty large service area. Beyond the general fund revenue that's allocated to this, the second largest component of funding is grants. It's a combination of federal and state grants that we receive from Clackamas County to support senior services in our area. And then on the expenditure side of things, obviously personnel is the highest cost there. Materials and services accounts for some senior programming. Transportation is a large portion of that $313,000. That is the elderly and disabled trips that pick up seniors and take them into the larger metropolitan area for their medical appointments or other needed services that aren't available out here in the Sandy area. So it's a really important lifeline for those seniors that either can't get themselves to where they need to go or just extra little bit of help to get support that they need. Transfers, we've already kind of talked about that in other budgets, but that's assisting in paying for the indirect service costs. And then a pretty healthy contingency there for the unexpected and unforeseen expenditures that may arise. Since reopening in May of 2022, there's been nearly 2,500 participants that have enjoyed the senior services we provide, which includes trips, classes, nutrition, transportation, all of those things. The department has diversified revenue sources, they've analyzed new revenue streams, and again, as we mentioned previously, working with the consultant on cost recovery where appropriate. And then goals for the upcoming biennium, again, volunteers, called out in this area as well. There's a number of volunteers in senior services, specifically a number of volunteers that help run the Meals on Wheels program, getting out to the service area. In fact, I don't think we have any staff that are doing driving at this point for meals unless they're just backfilling an absence of a volunteer. So it's a volunteer heavy department for sure. And then integrating increased programs and services with community business partners and various organizations to expand programs and services. So an example of this would be partnering with a local nonprofit, either expand services that are already provided or figure out you're doing something very similar to what we're doing. Are we duplicating that work? Can we be more efficient? Can we streamline the process and gain efficiencies both internally as well as ease of access for the aging population in our service area. Already mentioned this, but just to reiterate, grants include both federal and state funds that are paid on a reimbursement basis from Clackamas County. And then materials and services, that increase in part is due also to just increased service costs and increased desire for services in a post-COVID-19 environment. And that's not unique to this department. That's more programs that we talked about. It's more people that are needing assistance with driving or getting to doctor's appointments. In this department, it's kind of across the board. We're seeing an increase in participation and
Good.
yeah, and it's great that we have the ability to provide a service for that. And that's it on the senior services side. Happy to answer any questions or kick it off to someone else that can answer questions if I can.
John, first, then Kathleen.
Do you remember my question from last biennium on this topic?
Is it service area?
Yeah.
Yeah. You want
So
to
for
break
everybody
down?
else,
I brought it up.
so for everyone else, it's like, how much of our budget is serving people outside of the city limits versus inside, and how does that relate to the county grants and matching funds and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so high level, I think it's about 60% outside city limits, 40% inside city limits.
Wow.
We've been able to renegotiate some of the reimbursement rates with Clackamas County, so we're getting $1 more per meal than we were previously for outside residents than we are for inside residents. So we're inching along. The county, quite frankly, doesn't have a lot of funding in this area anyways. I don't think the county actually uses any of their general fund or money to pass on to us. It's all federal and state dollars that are allocated to them from like either Department of Human Services or federal level that passes the money that I can't think of. But Solar American Act, thank you.
So I know it's harsh, but why do we do that? Why do we provide services for people outside the city?
I asked that question and the answer, yeah, 60%, but they're paying 25% and we're paying 75% for these services. And yet 60% are outside.
No, I love these people.
Sure. It's a valid question.
But I think we owe the residents of the Sandy the answer of why do we do this?
So I think the short answer is that the service area was set up long, long ago. If you look at a map of Clackamas County, every city has a distinct service area. Sandy, which is not uncommon to just senior services, but to many of our services, is surrounded by a lot of unincorporated area that just becomes sort of the hub of everything around us. Larger cities closer in Clackamas County don't have the same problem because you have just a couple parcels that are unincorporated area, but you're butting up against another local agency that's providing the service.
But doesn't ours go almost to Damascus?
Yeah, how big is our circle?
Yeah, I mean, I know it goes to Gubby, but I think it goes almost to Damascus.
The final route.
Talking just the meals on that.
We just had a home delivered meal. It's just right outside of Damascus.
Yeah, medical appointments, all that.
Well, I understand that, but these are people who need these services.
For sure.
And I mean, how much money are we talking about? It's not that much money.
So on the transportation side, it's almost 100% reimbursed. And we've made that adjustment in the contract too recently.
Yeah.
We're getting actual costs. So
Yeah.
that is,
I
yes,
mean,
it's a
we're
large service
probably
area.
yeah. I
About
mean,
735,000.
well, no, but I see what your point is. What I want Tyler to bring out is how much money we're not really talking about here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
how much is that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, you're getting, I mean, I'm gonna do some off the cuff math real quick, right? But 270,000, let's call it in grants. You've got for the programs that are reimbursed from the county, 156,000 in transportation, 30 in nutrition, so that's 186. You've got activities and other stuff, so about 195,000 in program specific costs. That doesn't include like repairs and maintenance on vehicles, which we also get reimbursed for. I mean, I think really the large share, and John could jump in and provide this, thought process on this as well, but I think really the large share of senior services is the staff time that we do in-house to manage it.
Regardless of where the people live.
Exactly. So, I don't foresee a ton of savings. If you were to remove the 60% outside of city limits, we're still gonna need a driver for local in-town shopper, senior shopper shuttle services. We're still gonna need a client services coordinator to manage all of the intake paperwork and continued compliance with, those seniors that get Meals on Wheels or get any sort of other service from City of Sandy. You're still gonna need a center manager to help facilitate the leadership and development of that, department. So if you drill down, I mean, I don't have an exact number here, right? So we're kind of just topping, but there's maybe a combined FTE if you take a couple hours from this person that's not doing this now and a couple hours from this person that's not doing this now. It's not $700,000 that you come up with that goes back into the general fund. It's really, if you're still providing the services, growing that area doesn't.
Well, it doesn't mean
increase
that the
the
county
overall
shouldn't pay
cost.
their fair share though.
Correct. And we've increased, John and I worked a lot. He's been here a little over a year now, and the first probably 6 months of John's time here. But the year prior before John arriving, I had taken over the senior center contract with Clackamas County, and so I kind of took a deep dive into that. When John came on board, he and I spent a lot of time working with the county. Like I said, we've got an increase in the reimbursement rate for outside city limit meals. We had a change in the contract, due actual cost on transportation costs. So we have been making progress. It's slow. The county also.
Jan, do you have any input on what the county's budget and what we could do to?
All the numbers are going down.
I mean, that's the
There's a
challenge that we have is that they
$15
gave us 12,000 more and yet our costs went up, like 200,000 or something like that. And we're taking $1 million out of the general fund, 750 plus carryover to, pay for this. And just like Linda said, I'm just trying to struggle, obviously these people need these services, but I'm just kind of wondering why we've taken on such a big bill. And yet, sort of like our library thing, the costs keep going up, but the amount of money they gave us is going up this much. And so something they're just, it's not a sustainable model for us to be providing services to all these Clackamas County residents, and Clackamas County doesn't have to reimburse us for those services because we can all agree they need to be served.
Well, Jan said that the county has a $15 million balloon fee for the courthouse.
Right.
for the, in this budget, 15 million is going to the courthouse, so there'll be a number of cuts.
That's less than our, you know what, millions of dollars are wastewater and our water, you know, we're talking 80 million, so I'm not gonna cry a bucket of tears for that, you know? Yep, it's.
The one thing to all their points, though,
Yeah.
is the county in itself has a cost recruitment policy. They should be recouping costs. I think it's only fair that they follow their own policies when it's out going outward. I agree that the people need it, but I also think that we should be fairly not making a profit. I'm not asking for that. To be recouped for those
Definitely
costs. That's
advocating
fair.
with your, county commissioners.
For sure.
You're, making that case with them because they're the ones who are eventually are gonna try and make that right.
And I want to appreciate the work you have done over the last biennium. I mean, it's noted, it's just still an opportunity to close that further.
Absolutely. And I
Sure.
think, John and his team have continued to work on that, have those conversations. The services need to be provided. Clackamas County is not going to open up a senior center just outside the city limits to serve them. And so if we're going to be the service provider, we just have to continue to work on bridging that gap between cost of service and reimbursements. Michelle, I saw your hand was up. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, and just and really quick, realizing that this is one of those things where we're losing, we'll lose. But one of the goals with the department too is fundraising to help offset the subsidies for some of these programs for these to help the seniors in need. And so that's something that when I've talked with John, that we've realized we could do more. And so that's to talk about the three legs of the stool for these services, that the fundraising is one portion of it. So we will and recognize there's a subsidy there. And so that's how we plan to offset it as well, to continue these services.
Seeing no more hands. Parks, Building and Grounds. So the third branch of this Parks and Recreation Department, page 48 is where we're on now.
Is this the final one for the Parks and Recreation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So Parks, Buildings and Grounds takes care of all of the parks and trails within city limits. It also provides internal services for minor repairs and maintenance on city buildings, picks up trash, throughout town, in the parks, at city facilities. So it's kind of a catch-all for many of the needed services that are provided beyond just parks, but also sort of facilities or building maintenance. We do, if you don't know, we do own a house in Warnstead Park that we rent out to a resident.
Mayor's house.
The mayor's house, is that what I heard? Okay. And the revenue from that rental property is reflected in the fines, fees, and assessments there, as well as some plaza revenue and some other minor revenue proceeds. And then you're probably noticing there's a large increase in the general fund revenue contribution from 870 this biennium up to 1.4 million. We will talk about that more as we go through the next couple slides, but I'll circle back. I'm not ignoring your question. Same with the corresponding, significant increase in the personnel services, which I will follow up on shortly. Materials and services, you'll also see an increase there that just reflects the increased cost, specifically of utilities. The water rates have increased and sewer rates have increased, as everyone in this room is aware of. A splash pad is not a very water efficient item, and so there's a lot of costs associated with operating a splash pad. Also, just irrigating parks and keeping them green in our warm months is expensive, and so there's a cost associated with that.
Thank you for turning it on tomorrow. I'm sure it'll be warmer.
Thank you to the.
Joe, is it being turned on tomorrow?
Yes.
Takes
Cool.
3 days for the
Yeah.
unspeakably
3
warm
days
weather, is that
in
what I
the
heard?
80s.
Yeah.
The response was huge.
Projecting
They
3
needed it.
days in the
Like,
80s.
my phone was.
People were asking questions first thing this morning.
Absolutely.
I'll make sure to tell him John Wallace is instrumental in that.
Yeah. And I live right there, so I can.
Yeah.
About all the time.
And he has kids, so I have a feeling he had a vested
In
interest.
Oregon, you can go from 65 degrees and people are unhappy, and then the minute it hits 80, they're complaining about the heat.
Yeah.
So
I loved it. There was not a complaint out of me today. I was happy. It was lovely. Capital outlay reflects $100,000 for cameras in Minot Park. So the whole installation cost of getting cameras in there for security components, for security purposes rather. Debt service is the monthly lease payments for a vehicle for the Parks Department, and rent transfers and contingency, same thing that we've already touched on with other departments. Accomplishments for the current biennium, incorporated biodiversity into the parks and green spaces. It completed and implemented a pest management policy. Completed some projects in Miami Park, including electrical upgrades, which we already touched on, specifically related to Winterfest. The pervious asphalt parking lot was restored, so there's not lake mining anymore. It drains appropriately.
I love that it has a
Actually park
name,
there.
Lake Mining.
I just made that up on the spot.
I don't
if
think
that's
you're the
been
only person,
before.
I've heard it before.
Okay, well, I probably heard it from someone else and stole it. And then completed some repairs and upgrades at the community garden at Forest Park. That was really some upgrades that hadn't really been touched since it was constructed. And then goals for the upcoming biennium. Continue the efforts to support bee city and biodiversity in our park systems and natural spaces, and then complete some necessary upgrades at Sandy Bluff Park. I will also add there is some grant funding that's going to help in the upgrades at Sandy Bluff Park. Shelter and some dog park improvements. That'll be an exciting sort of revamp of that area. We get a new bee suit for Carl. That's
One
not built into the budget.
One stripes.
But we can definitely pass that along to the Parks and Rec team.
But I do know that the Parks and Recreation people have put together a donation system for the flowers and stuff for the park. Super duper. Making money too. But all nation flowers.
And some highlights, so fine fees and assessments includes the rental property, we talked about that. Capital outlays, cameras. I want to highlight some future challenges really quick, and I don't think it's a surprise to most of us that some of our parks really are going to need some significant reinvestment in the upcoming years. We don't have a lot of that built into the existing biennium, but for the biennium beyond that, there will be probably a larger discussion around reinvestment in mining Tupper Park, for example. Fantasy
Is that
Forest
covered in
is-
the Parks Master Plan?
That's a question for Rochelle, if you want to answer that real quick.
Yeah, so actually deferred maintenance is not covered in the Parks and Trails Master Plan. It's for future growth and development. But I know that there's, we are doing our own assessments with Tiana, who's the Parks Maintenance Manager. And she actually received her CIPC, which is Certified Park Safety Inspector. So she is prioritizing safety and we're taking things like safety, function, and aesthetics in that order. So if something's a safety, we're marking it, we're fixing it, we're finding what the quote is. So we're doing that internally, but it's not in the Parks and Trails Master Plan.
ADA issues that also need to be addressed. And so they're chipping away at what can be, what are the easy wins that can get taken care of quickly, what needs to be documented and planned for as far as, a larger sort of reinvestment and then, I'm sorry, and budget for. And then also identifying, if there is something that's at the end of its useful life, what does a replacement look like for something substantially similar, or is there a whole, larger process that needs to be conducted for that? So they're working away at those things. But what I want to jump back to now that I said I would ignore the questions on increase in general revenue and increase in personnel, for example. And so I touched on this a little bit earlier. We reallocated a lot of the staff under that Parks Recreation and Senior Services umbrella. And previously, there had been no time allocated for a director in the Parks Building and Grounds budget. It had just been the Parks maintenance workers, which reflected the time spent actually working in the parks, but didn't really reflect the administrative overhead of having someone that supervises those employees and helps direct their work and working on long-range plans and safety assessments and things like that. So we've reallocated Rochelle's time, Parks and Recreation Director's time to be equally distributed among parks, seniors, and recreation, because she's actively involved in all of those things, managing a team under all of those things. And so that's notably the increase on the personnel side. The increase on the general revenue side, of course, is to balance that budget. So what needs to happen this year? What's the staff requirement for the existing parks that we have? And to ensure that balances. And so there's, I guess that's the science to it. Right, so that's where you get the 1.4 million. Questions? I'm sure there will be some.
Kathleen, under the salaries, I was just wondering about, let's see. I had somebody else if you have a question.
Any other questions?
Well, yeah, just under the loan principal, 8,100, how much do we actually owe?
So that was a leased pickup truck. I don't have the exact value, but it was somewhere in the low $20,000 that was financed for that leased vehicle. So we're probably, after this biennium, I think we only have one more year.
I was
on
gonna
that
say,
lease.
because then it would be 16,200 for a biennium, right?
No, so you're looking at the biennium total. So
Oh, the
it's,
biennium
yeah, it's
total,
about
okay, so-
360 some dollars a month, I
So
think, if I
that-
remember correctly.
2.5 budgets.
Yeah, I think it was a 5-year lease, so some $1,000.
One thing that I've been begging for how many years, I don't know, even before I was at city, when I was on the Parks Board, was the breaking up of this budget to separate grounds and facilities, city-owned grounds and facilities from parks, because there's all these facilities that need all this work, and it's just, and so I just want to, Tyler had said that they're looking to do that next biennium. I want everybody to hear that, because I'm taking that as a promise, because.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
I meant to mention that.
Bifurcate that budget?
Yeah, because we really do need to know how much parks cost us, and when you include all these facilities. And then the other thing that's kind of neat about that approach, though, is that you have that facilities fund that all the different departments throw in just a minimal amount. We'll find out that later. But that's the facilities and the grounds and that fund should all be married together, and incoming and outgoing and all that. So I am excited about that finally happening.
Yeah, if I can expand on that just
Yeah, go ahead.
briefly before you move on. Rochelle and her team purchased some software that's really helping them track their time and allocating their, is this a parks sort of repair item? Are they spending time in a building replacing a light bulb or helping fix ceiling tiles or whatever that is? And so they're starting to build the case for how much time is actually spent in parks with that crew and how much time is actually spent in buildings, building maintenance. And so that's really the reason why we didn't split it out this biennium, is because we want to have good data as to how much time is being spent between each of those functions. And then, we'll have the case of, do we need a dedicated facilities person? Do we really just need to allocate a portion of time? And what does that picture look like? And so I think we need at least another year or so to develop that data and incorporate it into the upcoming.
Jeremy. I think it's a good point, because a few years ago, before COVID, like the week of before COVID, we were looking at surveying for a Parks and Rec district. And so by splitting this out, will give us more finer detailed information for
that,
investigating that in the future. That is what the will of the council community wants. So.
Yeah, and maybe you're kind of getting to it kind of with what you're saying, but and this might be a little more of a conversation for Jordan, but how far are we, like with the addition of a new park? Say, we get that community campus park, it's that much more maintenance, it's that much more, money going towards facilities, because we're gonna have bathrooms and parking stuff, right? So how far are we from having to have like a maintenance department, a whole nother branch of city government that covers maintenance, facilities, and all of that?
Well, I think we're there. And I think that's part of the sustainable staffing plan. With the new park, we're looking at the kind of last quarter of the biennium when that park's gonna come online. And I think we're sort of projecting that's when we're gonna be adding the body in the parks maintenance function. But in terms of facilities, the question about the roof and maintenance.
That's kind of where.
If you think of, I think in the last decade, give or take a few years, a new police building, a new library, the operations center, we have the bunker building or the annex building. All those things used to be under one building. And the city rapidly grew. We built all these new facilities. Guess what? We got to maintain those. And we used to we currently still do, our parks maintenance folks do that. And it takes away time from them maintaining parks, which we've added a whole lot of parks over the last 10, 20 years too.
so we need to create a new department, a facilities maintenance department, pull those line items out of the different budgets, put them under one budget that controls the maintenance of all
Right,
city
and
facilities.
so this goes back to earlier conversation about police officers, code enforcement. How do we prioritize what positions are most important for what the services the council and the citizens want, right? Because we have, financial analysts that's needed, especially with all the big projects, $126 million biannual budget that we're managing. All those things are competing with each other in the general fund. And so that's why breaking that down, really projecting out our forecast, what can we afford and when, is super important. But facilities is, it costs you more later.
Right.
if you're not
Well, it's one of my concerns. I mean, I want the community campus as much as anybody else does, but I'm also one of these people that we can't keep building stuff. We can't maintain things, right? So there's gotta be, you gotta be able to maintain it if you're gonna build it. So.
Well, yeah, I think that, but what I've seen is I'm sure they respond to maintenance issues and stuff, the parks folks do. But what when you look at your facility master plan thing that you did not, there's all these things that have kind of identified that needed to be, maintained. You're supposed to be cleaning the gutters, you're supposed to be doing all this stuff. That's not getting done, it hasn't been getting done. And so that's where we do need that all in, one department to kind of, really focus on that. And there's got to be funding from those departments to help pay for that. So, we already have 3.5 FTEs for the parks and, I feel pretty comfortable with that, but yeah, and we've got another one coming on, or, half another one for the new park, but I definitely think we need to get this building facility. So it's going to come up in that later budget too, because I think the amount of, we have a $63 million budget and the amount we're putting into that facility maintenance thing is something like $200,000 a biennium. So
I think as a citizen, I want anything that my tax dollars have helped build or pay for to be maintained, just like I would my own personal property. And I don't want excuses as to why something didn't last long enough or whatever. It's something that we should be responsible for as a city to make sure that they're getting as much for their dollars they can.
So since this is kind of gonna be the baseline moving forward with everything being pulled apart, how much more or less, or where are we at compared to last year? Recreation costs.
I don't have those numbers readily available, but we can compile that and shoot it out.
Anything else for the parks?
Real basic.
That's the recreation next. Jan first, and then Carl.
There's a $95,000 increase for machinery and equipment. It was only 5,000 last year, now it's 100, I think, yeah. And I just wondered what was in there.
Yeah, that included the cameras, so it maybe not the best line item title, but it's a capital expenditure, so that's just reflecting the cost of
So
the
it
cameras.
was really a capital expense.
Yeah.
It's a security.
Carl's next.
I want to hear the groan, so. get ready.
Oh, is this art? Here it comes.
I don't see the art in there. We've got about 12
I agree
different
with
art
you, Carl.
projects in the city. At least a couple of them are about to go, needing some significant repairs. Don't see that in there. But no groans.
I was happy to hear it. A couple of things I was just set up here about the capital outlay of the 100,000 in cameras to Mining Park. One was why not have consideration of having that as an ARPA expense, considering it's a one-time expense and goes away? Couldn't we utilize ARPA for something like that? And then Kathleen kind of points, I agree with. I don't know. I want the background. What is behind the decision when we're doing security cameras at Mining Park to take that out of the parks budget instead of the law enforcement budget, since that is kind of a public safety expense?
I mean, it's an asset that's in the park, so from a accounting or finance perspective, it makes sense to live within that park's budget. I had a quick conversation with Rochelle about this, and my understanding, and Rochelle, feel free to jump in here too, please, is that the parks team would be probably likely first review if there was some damage, and then turning over any footage to police if there was a report that needed to be filed or a claim that needed to be made. I don't think that the Parks Department is intending on increasing the police workload if they can manage it internally themselves.
Who
And
monitors
identify.
the cameras?
The Parks Department or Rochelle's team would monitor those cameras from a functional standpoint. Of course, if there is criminal activity happening, that would have to get referred.
Who monitors the cameras on the skate park?
I didn't even know there was cameras on skate parks, so I could not answer that
There
question.
were,
There's-
8 years ago, there were cameras.
There's no cameras.
They were on the school building aimed at the.
But they were the Oregon Trail School District cameras. They were not the city's cameras.
Because it was their
It's not a
property.
school.
It was their property.
Yep.
Saying that just peeks out the.
Yeah.
I have to remind everyone, no one's sitting there monitoring the TV screen, the security.
No, it's if something happens, they go back and see
Something
who did it.
It's to find who did it.
Yeah, don't want to have any false impressions.
That's all fine. Yeah, that's all fine. It was just curiosity, but it is, the ARPA thing's interesting.
Well, and when I asked that question, you said something, Rochelle said, I believe it is ARPA funds. So is that 100,000 coming out of Parks Capital or ARPA funds?
Yeah, so there's a really long convoluted answer to that. The short answer is that you've got general revenue that's been allocated to a department that's fully funded by general revenue. So whether you call it $100,000 of ARPA that we transferred, whether you call it, that ARPA number would have just decreased, but the total budget's not going to change. I mean, if you want to touch on this too, Jordan, it's not really, we didn't call it out as an ARPA expenditure. It's part of the general revenue allocation.
But ARPA's reimbursing.
Stumble through that, but it's just an accounting change. It wouldn't be a budgetary change. Unless you were wanting to allocate an additional $100,000 to the parks.
From the 900 and something.
Right.
Well, and
or
when
whatever
you
other
talk about
purpose.
getting the swim lessons and all that, that's where you've got a little bit of flex there, whether you pay the swim lessons with ARPA or the other.
Swim lessons are ongoing, lights are permanent, one-time expense.
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
that's it. If you're looking
Yeah.
to maybe switch the dollars as ongoing general revenue dollars like property taxes and use that 100,000 in another department. And then take 100,000 of the one-time surplus ARPA funds for equipment, one-time uses, that I can see that strategy.
So any more questions on the parks, building and grounds?
Yes,
Carl,
as a matter of fact, these,
other than arts.
not art, this is staffing. And I noticed in the parks, we've increased about 0.7 or so. In senior services, we've decreased about 0.6 FTEs. And then finally in recreation, we decreased again, almost 1 FTE. I'm hearing a lot of things about shuffling people back and forth to balance out the correct amounts. Are we, first off, is it 0 increase?
It's
It's
relatively flat. I don't have
Wasn't it
the
0.2?
number in
I got
front of
0.2
you.
plus.
Okay, so 0.2 plus that's the number you calculated. I don't have that in front of me right now.
That's that extra in the second biennium, the extra parks maintenance guy. Yeah.
Is that what that is?
Yeah, I don't believe so, no. I can do a deep dive into personnel when I compile the committee member Sheldon's question about where we were, compared to where we're going. I can include the FTE counts on there as well, just to paint that.
Well, you've got to have FTE increase, right?
I got 1.2, but either way, it was an increase in FTEs. I guess my question was, is it hiring somebody new or are we just adding more time? Because I know several of these people are part-time.
There's no new added body in that department. It's a reallocation of staff. It's also a slight change. Oh, I think the 0.2 actually comes from, now that I'm looking at my other spreadsheet, a portion of one of the parks maintenance workers was previously allocated to the community campus site for maintenance of that building because it wasn't a park. It was just a city facility, city site at one point in time. There's no FTE allocated to that department or that fund anymore. So everything is housed under the Parks and Rec department. So I think that's where that 0.2 FTE comes from.
Okay. Just a little point of order. What's next? Are we done with, so we're,
You
next
got one
is,
more with me and then I'm gonna shut
what's
up
the
for a few
one more
minutes.
with you?
And it's not under the Parks and Rec umbrella. We're gonna jump ahead just a couple pages to do economic development if you wanted to run through that quickly and then.
Well, it depends on how quickly we can run through it. I'd like to take, I'm sure there's interest in taking a 5-minute break. And then we'll come back with economic
It should be brief, so yeah, we can just hit it real quick when you get back. From the break.
and move on from it. And then we'll decide at that point, does everybody want to stop again tonight in about an hour and 20 minutes? Or do you want to go till 10 o'clock? I don't want to give short shrift to any budget. So right now, we've gotten through the police and the recreation and parks. And that's been in the first almost 2 hours of this meeting.
That's just what I did.
And we still have all of the street fund, sewer, all that stuff to do, which we hopefully will get through tonight in an hour and so. But if we, I'm thinking my optimism of getting through all of this in 3 meetings, including the urban renewal budget and allocating the ARPA funds, was slightly unrealistic. I'm thinking we're gonna take 4 meetings. And so rather than go into the point where people are just exhausted, we end tonight at 9 o'clock. We pick up again with whatever street fund, sewer funds that we don't get through tonight at the next meeting. And hopefully at the next meeting, then get into the urban renewal budget and spend the 4th meeting figuring out what we're gonna do with the ARPA funds, finalizing out and approving the budget for the year. So we'd be going on May 11th would be our last meeting instead of May 4th. That way, everybody gets a chance to ask the questions they want to ask, and we don't leave anything hanging or making people feel like they have to hold their questions because of a time limitation, because we got all the time in the world. I'm retired. I'd be happy to come back here. So anyway, we'll take a 5-minute break if everybody's, be back here before 8 o'clock. Tyler, you're a little short one.
Yes.
You're talking about economic development or Tyler?
Economic development.
I know, sure.
What's his name? Not Tyler, what isn't it? You said the last meeting?
Seabiscuit.
Seabiscuit.
I was gonna make a joke, but I didn't, but now it's been brought up.
You're supposed to let them forget about that.
Yeah, I know, I told Mackenzie about that. She's like, man, Tyler's gonna love you.
It's all right. I'll dress up like a horse. Counselor Exner can wear a bee costume and we'll do like a song and dance about that or something. We've heard it here.
Done, recorded and everything.
That's all we're- no longer needed.
And we got a full.
Wait, was that in the minutes we approved?
I didn't put it in the report.
I can't wait to see this float. Actually, I'll be here, so. Okay, I'm gonna blow through this one.
Wait, where?
Page number 57. So economic development is the general fund department that is really responsible for, like it says, development of the economy, specifically in the urban renewal district and downtown core. Getting about $200,000 in general revenue this year, so you can see sort of a steady decrease in the amount of general revenue that's been allocated for this department over the last several years. Part of that is much of the grant programs and programming that's managed in this department is in the urban renewal area. And so there's a justifiable reason to use urban renewal dollars to pay for those programs in lieu of general fund dollars. So because of the corresponding decrease in general revenue, there's a corresponding, or because of the general revenue decrease, there's a corresponding decrease in personnel services. Again, still one person that manages our economic development activity, but they're allocated between economic development and urban renewal. Materials and services is predominantly the SSCP program, the grant program that we have for nonprofits in town. I think there's $60,000 allocated to that for the biennium, and then really just about $28,000 for materials and services, conference expenditures, some supplies and branding and marketing, but not a whole lot of excitement there. And then again, transfers to the indirect service departments and then a small contingency. And over the last 2 years, economic development has managed 27 urban renewal grant programs. This is where we kind of talk about the crossover a little bit, urban renewal programs, but economic development manager that has managed these programs, totaling $700,000. And then work with the advisory board to develop the city's first economic development strategic plan, which is going to be adopted
Late May.
Thank you. Or work session, maybe. Okay. Work session. And then goals for the upcoming biennium. Of course, we want to implement the suggestions and recommendations in that strategic plan and facilitate business recruitment in our newly developed commercial area down at 367 and Bell. And of course, continue downtown beautification efforts and address the vacant buildings that are downtown and try to get those either occupied or some other sort of, program to revitalize and activate those underactive areas. And that's all I have for economic development. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jan,
Yeah, are you getting bites on land around 362nd and Bell Street yet? Any idea of businesses to come or industry?
Not that I don't think I can really share. We've had some preliminary conversations with the property owners about their conversations. But yes, they've had interest. One or two of the properties in particular. So then that project is going to be complete in the fall or kind of end of December, fall. We also have a moratorium right now, so I think there's a little bit of, they're aware of that, the timing on that.
So in the past, goal settings, different meetings of council, urban renewal commission, there's been kind of some holistic conversations about taking that economic development position and finding a way to budgetarily turn that into more of a director level position, to really kind of define what that role is as far as forward, looking how much we need to have that individual, chasing down some of these tenant improvement programs, facade improvement grants, facilitating those bids and all that, versus really kind of working to find businesses and recruit them into town and those kinds of things. Looking forward in this budget, like it's a 2-year budget, right? So how are we looking at that economic development director position? Is that more of an urban renewal board kind of a decision where we're looking at utilizing those funds for that? How are we thinking about that in this budget?
Yeah, and I think that's what we had touched on in that goal setting session, or talking about the different projects in the urban renewal fund, that given kind of a slate and the forecast of projects and the funding that we will have available in the SERF fund, that we would look at opportunities there to create that director level position that can be the person that can do the high level economic development, business recruitment, but also manage the big projects that can often come with that, right? Because a lot of these urban renewal projects are directly tied to business recruitment and retention and expansion. And so I think through this budget process too, that's maybe where we get input from the sort of budget committee about moving forward with a plan like that we have that high level position there.
But that will mean, so I guess in short, that would be funded out of the urban renewal budget, not this budget.
Most
primarily.
Yeah, that's kind
Okay.
of in our thinking.
Okay.
Clarification.
It'd be like 80-20 versus 50-50, so yeah.
What's the break now?
Right now, it's 40% economic development, 60% urban renewal. Because it would be more focused on, like Jordan said, those high level projects specifically within that urban renewal district and 80-20 split. Would probably make more sense if that was the case, not to get too much into the urban renewal budget, because we haven't touched on that yet. There's plenty of funding there to absorb some added personnel costs in urban renewal. If we reallocated that position to the 80-20, the 20% could probably be, vast majority of that, if not all of it, could be absorbed in the existing economic development budget without having to transfer any additional funds, just because of the way the allocation works
So
out.
72,000 is 40% of the salary?
Over a 2-year period. with benefits
Over 2 years.
occurs, and, yeah, and
I
other-
know.
It is. It's cheap.
any other questions?
What did
Okay.
SSCP stand for?
Special service contract.
Trying to follow your leadership chair, keeping it short.
This will not be so short.
Okay, how's it going, everybody? So I was just gonna jump right in, try to save as much time as possible. I have 2 divisions, planning and building. Right now we have 4 FTEs. However, a little bit of one of the FTEs goes to Public Works, and about 30% of another FTE is budgeted to help Public Works. I do have a really good relationship with Jenny and her crew. So one of her employees also does grading and erosion control inspections and some other stuff, GIS based for the planning department. And then we also kind of cross share with the police department currently on code enforcement. So what this budget would do would add 2 employees, a planner, and a code compliance officer or code enforcement officer. Right now, you have about a half-time planner is what the city currently has. About half of my time spent on actual planning. Probably about a quarter is spent on building division and just employee needs, recruitment, approving invoices, stuff like that. And then probably about a quarter of my time currently is spent on code enforcement and just other miscellaneous tasks that nobody at the city has expertise to handle. So there's a lot of my time that's spent on just random things that you can't really account for in the budget. So just a lot of random questions I get from realtors and people in town that it's not really planning, it's not really building. It's just assisting them with their property questions. So I just want to be very clear about that. So right now we have probably about half an FTE actually doing planning work. And then we do have a lot of consultants right now, and I'll go into that in a few minutes. But as you can see, the materials and services are much higher the last few years. And a lot of that has to do with the comp plan, the clear and objective audit, the EOA, the housing capacity analysis. So a lot of big planning projects that we hadn't done in a long time or had never done, such as the clear and objective audit. And so those projects are all being managed by people. So we do have kind of consultants working on planning projects right now. But if you look at these budgets, so the planning budget, if you look at it, I think I calculated this morning that if you remove the contingency, I think it's roughly like $1.2 million or something around that is personnel service costs and materials and services. So consultants working on long range planning. There's very little money allocated to other things like expenses related to supplies or copiers or anything like that. It's very little. It's just over 100,000. I think it's like $105,000. And the 166,000 is transfers for indirect support costs. If you look at one of the tables in the budget towards the back, about 50,000 of that's spent on city attorney. So I think the planning budget actually spends the most on Barry Elsner and Hammond, especially with all the developers that have become very litigious the last decade or so. So we do have a lot of attorney expenses in this budget. So I'm not going to walk through all these for saving time, but as you see, if you elect to fund those two positions, we'd have 3.22 FTEs in the planning division. We did increase the fees for cost recovery, and I'm hoping to do that again this year, another 6%. We received a $50,000 grant from DLCD, of which we've put about 20. Actually have about 27,000 of that in cash on hand. The other 23 is yet to be awarded, but we're going to get it here in a few months. We completed the visioning on the comp plan, and then as you can see, we did some other long-range planning work on the last few bullet points. We're also quickly working on the transportation system plan to bring that to a finish finally, and hopefully adoption in June. And then we processed a lot of land use applications. As we've already been talking about, I think that's going to slow down, obviously, with the moratorium that's in effect right now, although it's kind of shocking how many inquiries we're still getting. And there's a lot of people that still want to do pre-apps actually, because there's several different larger developers doing land banking in Sandy. So if you pay attention to some of the real estate transactions that have happened recently, there were, like, for example, there was a large one on Vista Loop Drive, and that actually sold to, they wouldn't tell me who it is, but a land developer, and they're just land banking it for when the moratorium's lifted or when development starts rocking in Sandy again. So there's a lot of people out there looking at land here. Some of the goals are completing the comp plan, completing the clear and objective audit, supporting council with their goals about emergent state regulations and code amendments, working with the economic development manager to finally complete the Pleasant Street master plan, which was put on hiatus for several years, and adopting revised violation schedule for the Sandy Muni Code. And a lot of this really, the last 3 bullet points really can't happen unless we have another planner in the department, Because what will happen is I'll be the one working on a lot of these bullet points. And a lot of the things that I'm currently doing will shift to that new employee, like the day-to-day planning and building review.
How realistic is it that you're gonna get in the plan? What's the availability of people out there that are qualified?
It's a good question. I think I'll get applications. But yeah, there's a lot of open planning jobs around the Northwest right now. And some cities have had trouble filling, so it's a valid concern.
You're pretty confident?
I'm definitely more confident now that the salaries are higher than they were 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah. I think also having some options to do some remote working is very important. In my field, a lot of what you can do is at the desk. You do need to come to the front counter. You do need to be able to meet with the public, but we have to be very flexible in order to attract talent and keep them. A few other things just to highlight. We're looking at doing the housing production strategy in accordance with House Bill 2003. I'll be going for another DLCD grant for about 50,000 on that this summer. So I'm hoping to have some assistance with writing that. Potentially applying for a Safe Routes to School grant once we find a local funding source locally here, whether that's urban renewal or transportation money or whatever fund that would come from. And then obviously just the day-to-day planning work that we do.
So what do you need for that, Kelly? So you need to show so much local investment into the Safe Routes for School.
Yes.
Right, so how much do you need?
It's based off of, so it's a really odd formula, but it's based off of the schools that are being impacted. So it's mainly Cedar Ridge and Sandy Elementary, and it's based off of how the percentage of free and reduced lunch. So the larger amount of free and reduced lunch,
Those
the
are the
let,
two highest schools with.
right,
Right.
but the lesser match has to be. I think last time I looked, it's about 60% would be covered by ODOT and about 40% would be covered locally.
So then does it become a function of how much we put in versus Oregon Trail School District?
If you could convince Oregon Trail School District, that'd be great.
So Oregon Trail School District doesn't feel like they would have any investment into the Safe Routes to School program.
I can't speak for them. I do know that they were very participatory in the Safe Routes to School study that we did. They were great to work with on that. I don't know what their current budget looks like, so I can't answer that.
So Jeff, will you, like, it's feeling like we need to have a board-to-board meeting here soon after hearing parks, right? As well as the Safe Routes to School. So let's start building out an agenda for that meeting. Sorry to get sidetracked, but I'd love for this item to be added along with the school facilities.
Just so you know, Mayor, I think you're looking at somewhere between 800,000 and $1 million to do all the projects in that program. So you would need, let's just say it's $1 million. You'd need a local match of about 400,000.
But we wouldn't need to do all of them. I mean, we could just, I mean, there was like,
Phase.
I don't know, how many, 8 or 9
You-
projects.
With how the Safe Routes to School program works, I have found out from talking to a lot of people, you want to go as big as you can. Because you won't get the reward if you go the next cycle again. They'll go to a different community.
Okay, but my point is, previously, the match has come out of our street fund, which we just robbed Peter to pay Paul, and it's empty. And we were using 600,000 from general fund to replenish it. So I don't want to take that 600,000 and then put 400,000 towards Safe Routes to Schools when we're supposed to be fixing our streets. But I agree with the mayor that, we need to be, I don't mind putting a little bit of money to it, but it really.
Needs to be collaborative.
Yeah, and we need to kind of not take it from our streets.
What's the timeline?
It's a 2-year grant cycle, so they only do it every 2 years, and I don't think it's this year. So it's actually the perfect time to start meeting with the school district. And yeah,
Thank you, Kelly.
I do have to have a commitment when I apply for it. So yeah.
Just to add on to that C4, when I was on C4, a lot of cities proposing for different monies that get through it were being proposed from other communities with safe school, safe.
We've got one
across the
in the
school
past.
for it as well. And then the other one is, can you use the Clackamas County We have money that we've done other sidewalks and things to be our match for that too, or part of that. I don't know.
The CBDG money.
Yeah.
I don't believe that's in the CBD district, but we could look.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I think it's been used for that area before in the past.
Yeah, we could take a look at it.
Sidewalks anyway.
These are just some of the budget highlights. I think I already actually covered all this, but here it is in slide format. You know, one other thing I will say about this division is I rely on a lot of people to run this department right now. To be very honest, with departure of 3 employees, I've had help from other people in different departments that has been greatly appreciated, but this department is barely swimming right now. This division, the planning division. You know, Jeff, David, Kevin's went above and beyond actually lately. I think he's doing more than 12% right now because we just do not have staffing. So I just wanted to thank everybody that's helped this division and also let everybody know on the budget committee that we need employees. Moratorium or not, if we want to accomplish goals and continue to process land use applications, we need at least one more planner on staff.
That's reflected in your budget.
Correct. And then the code enforcement officer, you know, one thing I will say about that is Kevin has an absurd amount of code cases to handle. When I worked in Klamath Falls, we had 3 code compliance officers, and I would say to cover the amount he's covering, they would have had 2 people doing it. So it's been long overdue that you add another code enforcement officer. And I think actually having them in 2 different departments will actually be really helpful in creating, you know, we work very closely with the police department and we have a very good relationship, but I think having them in 2 different departments will actually make it more distinct on what those 2 different employees' jobs are. There's going to be less blur. So I think it's actually a really good move that the council has decided to do there, having them in 2 different departments. Any questions on planning?
Hi, Kelly, thanks. I was just looking at the expenditures and it looks like supplies, postage, public notices, meetings, meals, all contract services all have a decline in their budget. And I'm just wondering what the increased cost of administrative fees, how that's even possible. And I know it's small dollars. I'm just wondering why it's lower and not flat.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the main reason is because I'm trying to project that if you also look at our planning fees, our revenues, I'm projecting those to be way down as well. And that's because we're going to be getting less planning applications. The only benefit of less planning applications is that our materials, our public notice costs, all that will also decrease because we're just not going to have to do as many mailings, as many public notices and stuff like that. And that's why they're down a little bit. Now, if the moratorium's lifted and we get a lot of hot development, those would obviously jump right back up.
Well, that's what I was just thinking about because this is a 2-year budget again. It's, I don't know what the moratorium is going to be, right? We don't know yet, but
2 years.
I don't think we're expecting it to go the full 2 years. Which means development, I expect to come back in the 23-25 session. And then you're also going to have a new code enforcement doing more activities, which means there's going to be more fees coming from that, at least I think.
Point of correction, the moratorium has 2 phases. And the second phase will extend well beyond 2 years until another treatment facility is built. So we have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean,
You have to have the capacity for the growth before you can.
You don't understand why he said that. We're gonna be debating, moving back and forth on the cap. that
Yeah,
entire
the
time.
number of, attachments that can go to it. I don't see that like
That's-
being
that's
held
not-
flat.
yeah.
No, right.
That
There
number's
will
gonna
be
go up.
Yeah, it'll go up.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And-
Yes.
And
I have a
that,
question
I
for
think,
council, for council members as opposed to budget members. Is there any wiggle room within your moratorium for needs of the community? If something were to come forward that wanted to be built that met a need of the community? Or is it just a flat line moratorium, nothing gets built until the sewer treatment plant is?
There's a lot.
Yeah, it'll all come out
Yeah.
shortly.
Yeah.
A lot of it's still under.
Okay.
But it
Just curious.
really has a lot to just do with hookups to the wastewater system.
no matter what the community want.
You don't have it, yeah. You don't want to end up getting fined or impacted.
And I was just asking, I mean, like I said, it was very small dollars, right?
Yeah.
A couple thousand here, a couple thousand there.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting them to be backwards. I thought they'd be flat.
So I'm very conservative on my budgeting, very conservative, personal budgeting as well. So the good thing about how I projected it is if we do get some unknown development action and our revenues are much higher than what I'm projecting here, obviously those expenditures will be higher too. But I think it does give us some cushion. I think this is a pretty good estimate, to be honest, for the next 2 years.
Thank you.
Just a statement. Chair. I just wanted to state that in my email, I stated planning was the most straightforward budget that I had seen in there. Kudos to you.
Thank you.
So my question is, I asked it earlier, but first of all, I appreciate all the hard work and reduced staffing that you've had, and you guys have been able to kind of keep the plates spinning and all that. So great job on that. The thing that I am worried about, and people have heard me say it before, is that with the comp plan, you know, the thing that we all use for the comp plan 4, I know it's got a bunch of other visioning and goals and woo-woo type stuff, but the zoning map is what we need. And you know, is kind of the come to Jesus moment. And that's, you know, doing that zoning map is going to take a lot of public involvement, a lot of time and effort, consultants and all that. And I want to make sure, and that's where I'm kind of confused, because I keep asking the question, when are we getting to that part of the process in the comp plan? And I haven't quite gotten a clear answer, and I want to make sure that in this budget, we have that planned for, because it's not, you know, it's not an easy, fast, cheap thing to do. So could you, you know, that's the question I asked him in an email, but I want everybody to kind of understand and the answer.
Yeah, due to potential Measure 49 claims, which are taking claims basically for related to zone changes. Cities don't choose to usually have the zone change and the comp plan change map modifications done at the same time you're trying to adopt the comprehensive plan, because those claims can hold up the whole adoption process. Back in I think Measure 37 claims, which started prior to Measure 49, those started in 97 or 98 after the last comp plan was actually adopted. I just looked it up a couple weeks ago. It was like 6 months later. So back when the 1997 comp plan was adopted, they actually did do zone change and comp plan map changes at the same time concurrently and adopted everything. It's not done like that really by almost anybody in the state of Oregon anymore. So what you first want to do is adopt the comp plan with all your goals and policies. One of those goals or one of those policies, I expect, will likely be to modify the zoning map and the comprehensive plan map. And then after
Inventory needs.
correct. So right now we're doing also what's called a housing needs analysis to look at all of our housing lands and what we need. We're also doing an EOA, which is an economic opportunities analysis. That's doing the same thing as the housing needs, but for commercial and industrial lands. Those things will also be adopted with the comp plan. And then after you get your comp plan policies and goals all set, that's when you would want to attack trying to do zone changes and comp plan map changes. And that way, if any Measure 49 claims or any lawsuits happen, your comp plan is already adopted.
Okay, so.
And so if you're doing, this is one more thing I'd like, that I would tell you, is I would never, you wouldn't want to do it how it was done in 97 at this point. If you're trying to rezone some property, you would pick like 10 areas and have 10 different ordinances or 20 different ordinances, because some properties might go along with it, change, adopt, and you would have that zone change done. Some properties are going to bring litigation. So you don't want to lump everything together, just like you wouldn't want to lump the zone map changes with the comp plan.
So when is the comp plan getting done?
That's scheduled for about February of 2024. So a little less than a year from now, about 10 months.
Okay, and then when do we, so that's where I'm kind of saying, so then.
Next biennium.
I mean, potentially, right? If you wanted this budget, to answer your question, Counselor, this budget does not have any money allocated to zone map changes and comp plan changes unless staff was doing it. If we had time and the ability to take them on, then this does have personnel costs. So myself and the other planner would do it. But this, to answer your question, this budget does not have money allocated for contractual services for a consultant to help with it.
How much would that cost you?
I have no idea. I don't even want to guess.
Depends on how many areas. I guess.
Exactly.
Well,
That's exactly
Well,
right.
I think at least starting the process in 2025, I mean, you're saying it's gonna be done in February of 24, and this goes to 25, at least starting the process, I mean, I don't wanna go in a year and not, I mean, that's kind of the bottom line for the comp plan.
Sure, it's one of the components of the comp plan, and for a lot of people, it's one of the easier ones to understand because it's very visual. Everybody's property is affected by the zoning map. So yes, I completely understand.
I understand your logic in doing 10 or 20 zoning changes if you're gonna do them and doing them separately so that if there's litigation. But the overall decision of those 10 or 20 things are coordinated all as one, right?
Not anymore. That is how it was done in
So if you
1997.
have a certain inventory, you need a certain number of R2 or, different categories of land. How do you do them separately and still meet your goal needs that are required by the state of a certain
Yeah,
amount of
no.
inventory of different pieces of land?
Yeah, I don't want to turn this into a planning meeting, but
I'm just curious.
what I will answer that on that committee member Malone is that you're correct. If the housing needs analysis identifies, you are correct on that. If it identifies we need 20 more acres of R1, say, I would agree with you. You would try to accomplish that in one ordinance.
Okay.
Correct. I would agree with you on that. Yeah.
Anything else for?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Maybe it's quick. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around some of these numbers, Kelly. So why was the beginning balance so much lower? Why are we starting with the beginning balance so much lower when we have FTE down? As well as why such an increase to the general revenue?
Yeah, a couple things on that. For one, we're not really seeing much, if any, employee savings. There's just different reasons for that with the layoff and everything. My budget's not really made whole on the employee vacancies probably until June anyways. So there's not much on that side. One of the other things is, and Tyler can probably explain this a lot better than me, but part of it's because we've shifted around the FTE allocations. So I know previously more of, like, for example, the associate planner role, that position was paid out of urban renewal sum. And I think this budget reflects it all out of planning. The other big thing is the code enforcement officer is 100% funded out of this account. Whereas when I had the senior planner and the associate planner, they were being funded more out of like building, and I think even a little bit of economic development and urban renewal. So there's more cost sharing, I believe. Is that correct, Tyler?
That's a good summary. I mean, the vast majority of that increase in personnel and the subsequent increase in general revenue is the proposed code enforcement officer at 230,000 for the biennium.
How could the code enforcement be applied 100% to that budget if the FTE only went up 0.46?
Reduced, the associate planner position was just eliminated. So if.
So to
one
absorb that
planner-
side. I got you. Okay.
Yeah.
So it still didn't answer though, why the increase from general revenue so much. That's just under 400,000.
Couple different reasons. So allocation is part of that. The beginning balance in the existing biennium 21-23, we started with 232,000. We only had a budgeted contingency of 63. So we were using about $170,000 of that balance for operations of that department, eating into what ideally would be one-time, funding that would be allocated for one-time expenditures, but it was used for ongoing expenditures. So that just,
I'm sorry to cut you off. Is that due to the moratorium?
I don't think you could pinpoint it to one thing. It's, we had our best estimate on what the comp plan was going to cost. We allocated additional general revenue for that. You've had some other contractual services expenditures, I think, that have just come up with various projects and undertakings that you had. So, it's not just like one item or one over expenditure here or there. It's a combination of, a multitude of things.
The housing needs analysis was like 40 grand alone, right? Yeah.
Something like that, yeah. And so the beginning balance, for the proposed budget is just reflecting that added expenditures that were absorbed in the existing biennium. And then, as Kelly already mentioned, the fines and fees down about $70,000 based on the moratorium. So that general revenue number is really just balancing his budget to give him a little bit of cushion on the contingency side.
Can I ask you that? Sorry to cut you off. Can I cut you, ask you a quick question about the contracting though? But in the line items, it went down about 60,000. It went from 250 to 193.
Yeah, and that's because we've paid more than half the comp plan expenditures in this biennium. And I think even the clear and objective audit and other items.
All right. I hope moving forward, like that we quit moving stuff around because it's super confusing.
You mean the FTE allocations?
FTE and reallocating things everywhere because it's hard to pick this thing apart and like tell you because you can't see the increases and decreases and I'm not smart enough to figure it out. So I'm relying a lot on you.
Kelly, just one last general question for you from me. Do you think that that's enough staff to meet the demands of development and saving for the next 2 years?
If we have a moratorium the entire time, yes. If the moratorium's lifted, no. If the moratorium's lifted and development starts going again, you're going to need to hire another employee.
Now it's gonna have to do a supplement.
Yep,
How do we
exactly.
do that contingency or what?
Supplement.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 30 grand in contingency, so that wouldn't.
I think we touched on this a little bit last week. If that happened, we talked about having a lag, right? To look at that if the revenues were like flooding in, so with all these annexations, the subdivisions again, and things like that, then we'll have to start staffing up. We'll get pre-app requests and things like, oh, activities that we're picking up, we need to bring someone on. It'll be a scramble, but I'd rather do that than hire up and
I agree.
not have the revenues.
Have more fees too. For sure. I guess I would just like to know, and you don't need to answer tonight, but I'd like to know how much more it would cost to get started on the zoning map process in 2025 to get it at least started. Because that's how we kind of deal with all this stuff getting pushed from the state legislature. It's with the zoning map. We can't do anything with just the comp plans. So the zoning map gets changed, nothing changes.
See none? What's next?
Building, this is an easy one. And the reason why is because you can't touch the money. I'll be very honest. It's a dedicated fund. Everything that's collected in revenue has to stay in this account. So our hope's always to collect a lot of revenue, build up that contingency. So when we have a downturn in the economy, we can float this budget is basically the summary of this budget. So we're up to $246,000. I know at one point I've heard we were close to $1 million in contingency in this department. And then 2008 happened and we went all the way down to about $20,000 or $30,000 one budget on contingency. So we're slowly building back up. The other great thing is even during the moratorium, I think this budget is going to be fine, especially if interest rates come back down a little bit, back below like 5% or so. And the reason why is because we have over 700 housing units vested. So between apartments, single family homes, duplexes, a few commercial projects even, as long as the interest rates don't go up even higher, which I don't think they will from every industry I've seen, is I think this budget's going to be fine for the next, 4 to 5 years, even the next 2 years during a moratorium. I think it's going to be fine. And so a couple of the accomplishments is we're trying to increase the fees in this division every year now. They weren't increased for about, I want to say 10 or 13 years at one point, but so we've done a lot of catching up over the last 5 or 6 years. We're pretty comparable with most other cities now in the region. We did adopt some new code provisions in chapter 15, which is the building code. I just listed some bigger projects that we inspected and improved occupancy for on that third bullet point. And then this division also kind of oversees the business license program. There's a lot of tie-in between issuing business licenses and giving occupancy for those businesses, making sure they're safe, making sure there's even simple things like grab bars in the bathroom, smoke detectors in the houses, stuff like that. So It also operates the business license program, and we launched an online business license program for the first time. So that was a pretty big deal. Some of the goals increase, continue to look at fees. There are some cities out there with building divisions now doing some unique things with technology fees and other things that I think Sandy should look at doing. A big thing in this division is we had to implement electronic plan review as an option for builders and developers by January 1st of 2025. And that's because of a House bill that was passed that we have to offer that in about a little over a year and a half from now. So that will have some expenses related to hardware and software. And then continuing to try to make more robust FAQs on our website and accessible punch lists for homeowners mainly.
Kelly,
And then, as I said, this is fully funded.
sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, yeah.
Super quick, we go back a slide.
Mhm.
As far as that electronic plan review, is that something that you'll be able to do in-house, or we have to contract for that?
Oh, boy. Right now, so we were using a system actually, I'll just back up a little bit just for a minute here. We were actually using a Microsoft-based system that Scott Lazenby built in 1994, I want to say. And
You had to throw that out there, didn't you?
it worked fantastic. No, it really did. But when he left here, he said, you guys need to get off this. So it took us a little while, but we launched that, I believe, in 2020. So now we are integrated with Acela, which is the state e-permitting program. So you can go on there, you can file, you can make payment, you can actually do inspection requests. What this House bill is making us do is you can also submit your electronic plans, and then we're gonna have to review them digitally.
Okay.
So that's, I don't know, I don't have an
That's
answer.
fair. That's
I think between hardware and software costs, I've been told it's probably gonna be around 30 grand just to get it started. But this House bill is making it a requirement, so.
Is there a lot of instructions on the other side? How is it easy, is it to understand?
I haven't had a lot of complaints. It's also used in over 50 jurisdictions in Oregon. So a lot of builders and developers already know how to use it from, exactly. And that's why we were gonna go with a different suit, but we switched to that because it's already been used in Oregon a lot. And the state has a on-call person, you can call anytime and they can, yep.
So this property that's been land banked, those people that are gonna develop those probably are familiar with that system.
I would think so, yeah. Anything else?
Don, did you have a question?
No, I was turning the page.
Turning the page, okay.
The only thing I would encourage the department to do in wake of, we still got the names, employee we lost, Shelley. One thing I feel like she did really good with some of those community outreach videos and stuff and social media, the updates about, we have less going on now because of the moratorium. But I thought that was a real strength that I'd like to see the department continue to focus on in the future.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. I would be looking for that in the new person we hire. It's not gonna be, I'm not that person. I can just let you know.
Yeah, I'm not
that.
asking you.
I can barely operate my phone, so. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Next budget.
Yeah, so Chair, there's something you could do now, hold a public hearing on the state share of revenue. It's a requirement for local budget law. There isn't, I don't think anyone in attendance online or here, so we can also do that at the next
Did they all
meeting.
know, did the public know that it would be a
I
possibility?
think we can
of
better
happening
probably
tonight?
advertise it. There's public comment at every single budget committee meeting,
Okay.
so that's always advertised that way. Otherwise, I think we have a choice here. We have transit. Greg was here,
Well,
Sandy
I
Net.
don't think there's anybody who can get done with the budget in 15 minutes.
Nope.
If anyone could, it would be Andy though.
Andy will not get through it in 15 minutes.
No, transit's gonna
It's all
have.
there
to-
on us.
Depends on whether she talks about it or not.
Transit might have some questions.
So
So the
maybe
ones
end
that
at
are left for
9:05?
the next meeting, other than urban renewal, are
Transit, streets, water, wastewater, stormwater, sandy net, and then a couple internal service funds and a debt service fund. Those should not be very involved, and I could run through those quickly. And if
Next.
you wanted to get
at the
through
next
them,
meeting, yeah.
like 2 minutes to go through those. If you wanna just
Really?
knock them off. Well, you don't ask questions, but they're all pretty locked in. The debt service one, we have to pay our debt service. There shouldn't be a whole lot of conversation. about
Unless you're in
that.
Congress.
So what are the thoughts
Mr.
of
Kevin
the
McCarthy and
committee?
If you can run through it, I mean, I think if it ends up going longer, we can bring in questions next time, right? Like,
Correct.
you could at least present it.
Absolutely.
I heard him say 2 minutes.
I heard- that's what I heard. That's what I heard.
2 minutes, so.
Start by- start by five.
The challenge is on.
All right, full faith and credit. So this is a fund dedicated to paying the debt service for the urban renewal issued bond in 2017 to purchase the aquatic center and the other investments that we did. $10 million. Oh, I'm sorry, page 82. I'll get,
Yeah.
maybe next week I'll remember that.
Full faith and credit, just as important for us as it is for the federal.
And so essentially, this fund is just housing the debt service. Urban renewal transfers money into this fund cuts the check. That's all there is to it. There's no personnel, there's no materials, it's just principal and interest payments. The city has 2 internal service funds, which essentially means we have departments that pay into a fund, and that fund covers the cost of materials and services or other items. So this is the first one, Operations Center Internal Service Fund. Page 101. Yep. So Operations Center is located down on Champion Way. It houses all the public works departments, park staff, police department has a bay down there for storage, and then of course transit. All of those departments that I just listed pay into this fund to pay for all of the expenses associated with that. They utilities, landscaping, building maintenance, and then specific to this biennium, $100,000 in capital outlay. There's some significant reinvestment needed as far as paint, some siding repair, some roof repairs, HVAC. I think I covered all that. Yeah, so all of those departments are paying a portion of the $100,000 to get that building so up, so to speak, back to the working order.
Got 30 seconds, brother.
Facilities maintenance fund. All right. Committee member Walker touched on this a little bit, but this is a similar approach. We have general fund and all of the utility funds that pay into this fund for facilities maintenance. The idea behind it was for large scale capital costs associated with city buildings. Think roof replacement, significant, capital repairs, not your paint that you should be building into your normal sort of maintenance stuff, but significant repairs that you can capitalize, have a useful life of more than 5 years, cost more than $5,000. So we had a beginning balance of about 400,000, 110,000 coming in. We know that we have to replace the roof on the community center. We know we need to do some significant roof repairs on the police department. We know that there's probably other things that are going to come up, which is why that number is at 300,000. So part of that is actual expenses that we are fully anticipating on having, and there is a little bit of a plug there for future, capital needs that we don't have to do a supplemental budget. If we say, oh, the roof's gonna fail at City Hall, we gotta add that roof to the roof replacement. There's some room there. And then of course, 200,000 contingency for other costs, but trying to be realistic and getting some of those large. No more, yeah.
No more flat roofs.
Trying to be realistic and that we need to make some reinvestment. We haven't spent a lot of money out of this fund. We've done the sort of facilities assessment a few years back to identify the needs that we had. And we've done a couple small projects out of this, but it's time to really spend some of that money and do some of the upgrades or repairs that are really needed.
Sorry.
One question. That's good.
So first question, so that 300,000 for contractual services, expenditures out of this would not come out of the other department budgets, so it's up and above whatever everyone else has identified. So where the chief identified a roof, that's in his budget, that's
No,
not
this
part
is
of
the
this.
roof. The roof is part of this.
The roof is
Yep.
part of it.
It's on the police department, obviously, that was a funny phrase, but it's part of the police.
part of the building.
Part of the building, thank you. But the funding for the roof is coming out of this. The paint is coming out of the police department's budget.
Then the second part of that question is, this 300,000, is this just a number, or is there a actual facility asset management plan behind this that says this is what it costs to keep our buildings up at a current level?
It is about 150,000 of truly identified projects. roofs and other.
Yeah.
And significant
And
things.
150 other.
150 other, we could easily put that in contingency and come back to
So
council.
that's the other side of the question. The question is really, do we know what we should spend in order to keep all of our stuff?
No, not an exact dollar figure, no.
Are
I
you
heard a
clo-
plan
are you
earlier where
even
they're gonna
close?
put that together.
I have a dollar figure in our facilities plan, not in front of me, but I can bring that back or send out an email of projects that were identified as immediate or near immediate need repairs or replacements. That number is closer to probably 1 or 1.5 million. Obviously, we don't have that funding available, so if there's some low hanging fruit that we could knock off, if there's other things that climb up on that scale of urgent repair versus near urgent repair.
So
A few of them, I think.
in we brought this up in other venues, with our wastewater and our other assets. When we take that, only the urgent stuff, then everything becomes a roof failure. And that's an expensive way to manage your assets. It's not cost effective. So I'm just voice my objection that we need to be much more proactive in facilities.
Well, I'm gonna say this $110,000 for biennium, 55,000 a year. We have a $63 million budget, and this money, 110,000 is coming out of, sewer, water, all those different departments. And so it's just mind-boggling to me that we think that we can maintain and repair and replace facilities for a $63 million budget worth of all the stuff we have for 110,000. I think that, we really need to be looking at that and figuring out what it actually takes so that we have, because this just encourages deferred maintenance to be piling up. So we got to work on that.
Okay,
This is one of the newest funds.
yes, well, we were gonna hold questions until next week. We didn't. That's okay, sorry.
This may be my ignorance of the budget, so you let me know. You're talking about that roof down, was just talking about, that's gonna cost us that RMLA. Why is that not a capital outlay instead of going to this budget? Why is it on the next page for capital improvement? Because it's gonna definitely last more than a single reporting
Yeah,
period.
so anything that's paid for out of this budget would be a capital expenditure. So it's a.
But it wasn't listed on any one of the projects on the capital improvement.
Oh, that's a great point. We can add those in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was there anything else of the ones you were gonna run through in 2 minutes?
Nope.
Okay, so next week we have public works, streets,
Transit, all the public
transit,
works
all those
funds,
things will happen next week.
telecommunications.
And that's probably all we're gonna get through next week are those funds. And then on the 11th, to the urban renewal agency, which is a separate convening and approval of the budgets, both of them. Okay, take a motion for adjournment.
Well,
I'll make a
I'll
motion.
take 2 out of that.
I'll make the motion.
I never get to make motions.
Okay, there we go.
Seconded, moved and seconded that we adjourn tonight and reconvene next Thursday, the 4th at 6 o'clock. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, thank you.
Aye.
You know,